underneath that cool surface, there's a really deep, interesting character that makes all of the superficial stuff actually meaningful. Today I'm sitting down with Ooms to talk about one of our favorite movies, 2004's Man on Fire. We'll break down how it builds an emotional foundation through human connection that allows us to enjoy the barbaric violence with zero remorse. We'll discuss the original novel, how Tony Scott achieved the unique look and sound, and the best revenge movie characters. But above all else, we'll keep coming back to the perfect chemistry between Dakota Fanning and Denzel Washington in arguably the best performances of their careers. But for now, sit back, relax, and welcome to my film club. As Man on Fire is one of my top 100 movies, we were always going to do it on this podcast. But with the Netflix show dropping the day this podcast comes out, there seemed like no better time for you and I to sit down and talk about one of our favorite movies, Man on Fire. Just start us off with, why do you like this movie? You rated it 4.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd, which is why I asked you to sit down with me. So yeah, just give us an introduction as to why you like this movie.
I think simply put, it's one of my favorite actors playing in one of my favorite genres, action, revenge, payback type movie. And I just think he's so badass in this movie. And for me, as one of my favorite actors, he's playing a specific role which I think he plays best, which is a troubled individual who's down on his luck, but he's deep down inside he's a good guy, does everything with like a moral purpose, even though it's a bit
ambiguous at
times. Yeah.
I think you hit on the two most important things. Is that my summary would be that it's a cool actor playing a cool character doing cool shit in a movie that looks and sounds cool.
Yeah.
But underneath that cool surface, there's a really deep, interesting character and an emotional story arc that makes all of the superficial stuff, let's call it the violence, actually meaningful.
Definitely.
So I think those two things coupled together is that I think the action genre needs that second level to really make it poignant.
Yeah, it gives it more depth. If it's just a guy going around guns blazing and there's no emotional aspect to the movie, it's not the same.
Exactly. And the perfect example of movies that also do this, which will probably come up, is something like John Wick. Obviously, John Wick is cool, but if it's just John Wick going around killing people because he's paid to or whatever, it's not the same as he's doing it because they killed his dog.
Yeah,
and it's obviously the same idea here. So we did Bicentennial Man together last year, starring Robin Williams. If you haven't seen that, make sure to go check it out. Very different genre.
Yeah, totally different. Yeah.
But I thought that was funny. So do you remember when you first saw Man on Fire?
Not specifically. I want to say I watched it during the COVID lockdown, and in terms of how many times I've watched it, I think I've only watched it maybe 2 or 3 times.
So I was 14 when it came out. I didn't see it in theaters, but I think I saw it very soon after it came out. It's possible my parents rented it at the video store or something like that, but I think it's very possible this is my first Denzel movie that I saw.
Really?
Which, even though it's very much the middle of his career, obviously at 14 you're still, a lot of his movies aren't the sort of things you would show to kids.
No.
So maybe there's an exception, but put it this way, in my memory, it's the first time that I thought, oh my god, this guy's amazing. And I think now everyone regards Denzel as one of the greatest actors of all time, but I think when someone is halfway through their career, it's not as obvious and people don't talk about it as much until later on, like he is now. And I just remember thinking, before anyone told me that Denzel was amazing, I was like, oh, he's pretty cool. And I like a lot of his other movies, but this is my favorite Denzel movie. I've thought about it carefully because Training Day is also my top 100.
Great movie, yeah.
And I think Training Day is a better movie than this, but I think this is a better, more interesting performance because the Training Day character, as cool as he is, he's mostly one-dimensional.
Yeah,
he is always playing this completely corrupt bad guy who's cool as hell. But I love the fact that in Man on Fire, I think especially the rectal torture scene, he that's where he's most similar to his guy in Training Day when he's like, oh, the president, that's you, like when he's playing like Mr. Cool and stuff. But then obviously, as you say, he hits so much more of his range.
He's a bit more ridiculous in Training Day, whereas in here he's much more professional.
It's a more serious performance.
He's got a job to do. He's like he's doing business.
And for me, range, and actually this is funny because it's with then range is one of the most important things for me when grading someone, the greatness of an actor, because it's fine to play one character. I'm literally looking at Joe Pesci right now, and like he always plays. Love Joe Pesci, but he mostly plays the same character.
Yeah.
But I do remember a few years ago even thinking about, does Denzel have that sort of range? And then I was like, of course he does, because of Man on Fire. And it's actually a very unknown movie where he plays a scruffy lawyer. It's called Roman J. Israel Esquire. And I remember seeing that. And so he plays kind of a loser. And I remember thinking that was a really important movie for me to see because it shows that he can play. He can play every end of the spectrum. Obviously, in Man on Fire, he's never a loser. But he goes from being a broken down man to being an emotionally connected man to being an angry man and a sad man to then just being vengeful and all those things. So yeah, it's a real display of his entire range. So you said you've probably seen it 2 or 3 times.
2 or 3 times.
I don't think I've quite reached double digits, but I'm probably in the 8 to 10 range. Wow. But that's the thing. When you see someone think when you're 14, like I've had 20 years to watch this every few years. But still, when I rewatched it a few weeks ago and then again this week, still I'm noticing new things. And I've learned so much preparing for this podcast. I'm just so excited to talk through it.
I was exactly the same when I was watching it the night before. I was like, I'm picking up a lot of subtleties. I think we'll probably discuss some of those later on, but
absolutely. So just some general facts about the movie. So the movie came out in 2004 and is the adaptation of a 1980 novel by A.J. Quinnell that you can find here, which I read, and I was going to maybe keep this for later, but I really enjoyed it. I've been trying to read all the books that I do on the podcast. And so, for example, last month we did Devil Wears Prada. Great movie, terrible book. I did The Prestige a few months ago. Interesting book, but definitely the movie was an enhancement. Here, I'd say the movie is an enhancement because it's basically taking a really good idea and fleshing it out by, you're actually seeing what John Creasy is. But the book is really good. So I'd highly recommend to anyone who loves this movie and is interested in kind of finding out more to read the book. I'm going to do a whole section later where I do the book versus the movie, but it's not a critical one. It's just going to be, here are some differences. Yeah. So this isn't the first time this movie was adapted. In 1987, so only 7 years after the book came out, they made a movie starring Scott Glenn. And interestingly, Tony Scott wanted to direct that one. He was really early on in his career. He'd made one movie called The Hunger, and they basically said, no, you're too inexperienced. So instead of making the 1987, he went off to make this small movie you might have heard of called Top Gun, which was somewhat successful.
I think I've heard of that. Yeah,
kind of a big deal.
I think he did okay.
But I do actually think a lot of the things we're going to talk about, I think it was for the best that he waited another 20 years to make it, because it would have been a very different movie if he had made it in 1987. And I did watch the 1987 movie, and it's not good. It's such a boring... It makes you appreciate this one version even more, because it's a very boring version. It's very flat. It's in Italy as well, right? Yes, because
the vibes are different. I think with Mexico City being the main location, it transforms.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the main things when they did the 2004 version was initially they were going to make it in Italy, but then Tony Scott said, well, if we're doing it in Italy, it's going to have to be a period piece. It's going to have to take place in whenever the book took place, so in like the 70s or whatever. But he didn't want to do that. He's like, no, we need to do it modern, but if it's modern, we need to move it because there weren't kidnappings anymore in Italy. It's like, oh, where are there kidnappings? South America, specifically Mexico City. Yeah. And I think, so I mentioned the TV show, which we'll talk about a little bit after the story. I believe that one is taking place in Brazil, because there is apparently a big problem there as well. Yeah. So the movie grossed 130 million worldwide against a $65 million budget. So not, it's successful. It got its budget back, but it was the 32nd highest grossing movie domestically, 41st worldwide. So not amazingly, but it is, I think, considered a cult classic now. It's not, everyone thinks of Training Day when they think Denzel, but I think anyone who really likes Denzel, I've listened to quite a few podcasts in preparation, and they say, I think similar to us, like, yeah, Training Day is great, but this is a deeper movie than that.
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably my go-to Denzel movie.
Absolutely.
And it is a bit of an underrated cult classic,
absolutely,
in my opinion. So,
do you want to guess the rating on IMDb?
I think it was quite similar to Training Day. I want to say it was a 7.7. 7.7, okay, yeah.
I don't know what Training Day was, but yeah, 7.7, which is strong. It's not top 250, but it's good. And for Rotten Tomatoes, the critics and the audience score, would you like to guess?
I'd like to think it's more of a audience. I'd like to think it's more popular with the audience than it is with the critics. So in terms of audience score, I'm going to say it's 80%. And for the critics, I want to say 55%.
So audience 89%,
wow,
adored, but the critics 39%.
Really? 39.
It's crazy. So the consensus is of the critics: Man on Fire, solid action, and top shelf cast are undone by a relentlessly grim story that gets harder to take the longer it goes on. So it's kind of like they didn't appreciate. And I read some of the reviews, and they basically say, "Oh yeah, the beginning is cute and stuff," but then it just devolves into this mindless violence. But I've had this with quite a few movies like The Prestige, where I think, because obviously a professional critic is going to see this once and then writing their review, and I think that's completely fair. But movies like The Prestige and this, you need to watch a few times. Very different types of movies, and very different reasons for rewatching it. But I think you do need to rewatch this a few. Like the first time, you might not even fully understand the depth of the connection with the Dakota Fanning character, and I think the more you watch it, the more you pay attention to little details, and you get it. So I can sort of see that if you weren't paying fully attention, I always think a critic goes out and they see hundreds of movies a year and they have to write reviews. So maybe at a superficial level, you could see it like that. But yeah, they're completely wrong. And it's nice to see that it didn't stop its popularity, and obviously the audience knows better.
But still, it's not on a level like, in terms of the constant violence. It's not like a John Wick level where that is...
Yeah, once John Wick starts, I think he's probably killing
ridiculous.
within 15, 20 minutes, and he spends 2 hours, whereas the other violence doesn't actually start till the second half of the movie. So it wasn't just the critics, so there were no major awards. I think Denzel was nominated for an NAACP, which he didn't even win. No Academy Award, nothing, which is crazy, because to me, this is like a Best Actor nomination every day of the week. So this was the second version of Man on Fire, the first being the 87, but it was readapted again twice in Hindi and in Tamil. I think that part of the world, they love the whole like rugged guy on a revenge, so it makes sense. It was filmed on location in Mexico City, which is, I know it's a cliche, but Mexico is really a character in the movie.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And it was the second Tony Scott-Denzel collaboration after Crimson Tide, and then they went on to do 3 more after this. Deja Vu, Taking of Palm 1, 2, 3, and Unstoppable. Unstoppable was their last one in 2010, which was 2 years before Tony Scott very tragically committed suicide in 2012. This is also a career-defining role for Dakota Fanning. This and I Am Sam, which came out 3 years before. She was cast in this thanks to being in I Am Sam. Those are, I think, arguably the 2 best performances of her career. She had a decent career. We'll talk about her more in the characters, but she is just such an important part of this movie. Other supporting cast are Christopher Walken, Mark Anthony, Mickey Rourke, and Rada Mitchell. So before we cross the spoiler line, if you haven't watched this movie, so far we've stayed spoiler-free. Here's a spoiler-free synopsis. A suicidal and alcoholic ex-CIA, we'll talk about whether he was actually CIA, operative, John Creasy's life is turned around when he becomes a bodyguard for the daughter of a rich family in Mexico City and develops a unique bond with her. Some synopsises give away a lot more. I think I stated, really, that's the premise of the movie. So now we're going to cross the spoiler line. So if you haven't seen this movie or are intrigued, go ahead, watch it. Definitely watch the movie before you watch the Netflix TV show. And then come back and hear us talk about every aspect of this amazing movie. Starting with the entertainment value. So I always like to frame this question as, how would you sell someone on seeing this movie about, if you like this type of movie and entertainment, you should watch Man on Fire?
I would say if you like action movies with a purpose, and
I
it's
love that.
such a satisfying purpose in terms of getting revenge, trying to get the girl back. It's definitely one of those movies I would recommend if you just want a satisfying action movie. It's almost weird in a way that it's at times it's almost like a feel good action movie.
It is.
When when he captures or kills off one of the bad guys, it's like, oh, it's so good.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not even just
like,
violence.
That guy deserved whatever happened to him. Sort of.
It's not even violence. Like, now we've passed the spoiler line, we can say you feel good watching him torture people, because the whole first half of the movie builds up so well about how fucked up and evil these people are, and they deserve everything that happens to them. So yeah, the official genres on IMDb are gangster, which I guess organized crime is involved, one-person army action, which is, I love that. It's one of those newer IMDb labels, but this is the epitome of that, one-person army. Psychological drama, psychological thriller, tragedy. There's something really Shakespearean about the whole story as well. Action, crime, drama, thriller. So yeah, so I think you're right. If you you've got to like action. If you don't like action, don't watch this movie. But like you say, there's a movie that came out recently on Netflix called War Machine with Alan Richardson, which is a bit like Predator, I think, but it's like wall to wall just action. And a lot of people have commented on TikTok and stuff on my review saying they just love the fact that they can sit down, turn their brain off, and just watch shit blow up. This is not that movie. No. You spent an hour without really any action happening, building up, as you say, the emotional depth of the movie, but then it rewards you in the second half because it's not mindless violence. And I just love the range of him. For me, the thing I love the most about movies is the emotions that you get to feel. I love to laugh. I love to be thrilled. I love to cry. And movies like this, I get all of that. There's some really, it's at bit times, and this is Denzel's like swag. It's really funny at times.
Some of his like one-liners and zingers.
We'll go through those in the script. But yeah, obviously very emotional with her, like touching. Yeah, you get. I can't really think of anything that you don't, and I can't think of an emotional that isn't felt at some point.
I think it does a good job balancing the emotions with the action scenes, because without the emotion, a lot of movies, they tend to just turn the action to 110%, whereas sure, in this movie there are lots of scenes where it's quite ridiculous, but it's not, to me it doesn't feel OTT. It's balanced out, it's mellowed out with the emotional aspect of the theme, the movie.
And the action scenes are actually quite short. I can't remember what it was. There was another action movie we were doing on the pod, and I said that actually I realized I live action movies, but I don't need a wall to wall. Like I don't need 20-minute action sequences. I quite like you build something up. 3-4 minute. Actually, I think maybe I was talking about Inglourious Bastards, that is technically an action movie, but there aren't, except maybe the ending. There isn't like a really long scene. It is just a few minutes. Same in a lot of Tarantino movies, actually, despite him being known for the action. Kill Bill is the exception. And I like that about this. And there is actually, I realized this when I was putting together the story. I also think the mystery element, the fact that he is kind of doing a detective work for the second half of the movie, is the perfect level of, it's interesting and complicated enough to keep you intrigued, but it's not too over the top complicated that you completely lose track. Maybe the first time you're a bit unsure who like Fuentes or Miguel or whatever is, but I think having watched the movie 2 or 3 times, you completely understand what the plot is, like who the different entities and why he's killing all these people.
Yeah, I think after maybe the second watch, you sort of understand more the players and the game and how obviously the deal goes sideways and who's responsible.
Because sometimes even in the John Wick movies, off the top of my head, I can't tell you like in the second one, like why did he kill the second group of people or whatever. Again, love the John Wick movies. But yeah, I do think here, killing with a purpose. And then finally, it's a very unique movie visually, and it just looks and it sounds really cool.
It definitely has its early 2000s vibe, like set.
Yeah, it's described as almost, because Tony Scott had a lot of experience making music videos and TV commercials.
I always think it looks like a Linkin Park video for like the entire movie, especially the start with the sort of introduction to Mexico City. It's so new metal, Linkin Park.
Honestly, at the beginning of my last rewatch, I was actually thinking like the whole movie isn't like this, surely, because it almost like it can almost make your head hurt. Like
it was when I was watching it in bed the other night. Like the intro, with shaky cam, the
flashing colors. Yeah, it could almost give you an epileptic fit.
But luckily, they sort of do calm down.
Yeah, they do. They do it. They do it. I think they do it right at the beginning. Then they go back to normal, which is cool. And then I think they use it a little bit at times, like the whole shoot when she gets kidnapped. They use it a lot there. And then I think they kind of use it more and more at the end, but it's obviously used to show his state of mind about the fact that he's basically bleeding out and dying. And so as he goes on, his whole vision, his state of mind is getting blurrier and blurrier.
It sort of makes you feel uneasy when it happens, which is like, it's a good editing.
But but as you say, they don't overdo it, thankfully. And the sound, I'll tell you all about how they achieve that visually and about the sound, both the music and the score. I did find exactly how they made that twang sound.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll tell you about that. But so very entertaining movie. So now we're going to go through the story. I think this bit is important because some people will be listening to this that haven't seen the movie in maybe 10, 15 years. So we want to remind you of everything that happens so that when we talk in more detail, you'll know what we're talking about. And also when we're doing that, we're going to go through our favorite scenes. The movie starts off with the intro that we were just talking about that's very epileptic-y. And it starts off with that stat about saying that every 60 minutes there's a kidnapping in South America. And I remember hearing somewhere that it was a made-up stat, but I did look into it, and according to ChatGPT, it's hard to know exactly how many kidnappings are done, but it does say Latin America, not just Mexico City. And they do estimate that back then especially, there were upwards of 10,000 kidnappings a year, which does equate roughly to what they were saying. So not a crazy stat, not too exaggerated. So something I really like, this is the sort of thing you only realize kind of preparing for this. So they do the whole introduction to kidnapping by showing you it happening to someone else who we never see again. And I think it is very good to kind of set the scene from the beginning. This is how kidnapping goes. This is how they get picked up. This is how they contact them. They basically, that way you know how it's going to work when it happens to Pita later on. And I think that's a really smart storytelling device.
Definitely. And the intro does mirror what happens with Samuel. He has to get in the car. He has to wait. the show go round and round.
And it does go well there, which obviously then it doesn't later on. So they show the example, you learn the process. Then cut to Denzel Washington introduction. He's driving across the Mexican border, immediately takes a sip of his flask. This movie is really good, whether it's showing you things or with lines about conveying something super simply. So like you see someone in the middle of the day drinking out a hip flask, you're like, he's an alcoholic.
Yeah, and he's sunk in his like taxi seat. He's like, what am I doing? Where am I going? A bit depressed looking.
Exactly. And then he meets Christopher Walken, who's like one of the cornerstones of this movie. They have this really nice barbecue. They drink together. And then again, they have this line, which is in one of my favorites, where Denzel asks Christopher Walken, he says, do you think God will forgive us for the things that we've done? And Christopher Walken goes, no. And Denzel goes, yeah, nah, me neither. Yeah. And again, you get hints of it later on, but you're like, okay, these guys are military people who have killed and done a lot of bad things. And again, it's hinted, but you've established it there. Like two things: he's a drunk and he's got this bad past. You know 80% of Creasy in the first 2 minutes of him being on screen. So they're just talking generally. They don't actually start talking about the bodyguard thing. Then we meet Mark Anthony and Mickey Rourke. Mark Anthony is playing Samuel Santos. So I've read the book, and the way my philosophy with books and movies, if a movie says something that clearly doesn't line up with the book, then you just go with whatever the movie said. But if something is implied but not fully explained in a movie, but it links to something in the book, you can basically assume that it's the similar. So I think he explains later with Mark Anthony in the movie that he inherited this empire from his dad, and he's seen as this like aristocrat, but actually he inherited a bunch of debt and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think he has a car factory in this. In the book, it's a textile factory. And basically he needs money. He's broke and he needs money to kind of modernize it and stuff. And so he's talking to Mickey Rourke. I don't think there's any hint here about their plan in that beginning conversation.
No, they don't directly
talk about it. But basically Mickey Rourke's idea was to get him out of trouble is we're going to fake kidnapping your daughter. It's not exactly clear when it happens. In the book, the plan is initiated before he's even hired. So I think it's fair to assume the same thing happened here. That the idea was you're going to renew your insurance policy. We're going to get you a shitty, cheap bodyguard. We're going to kidnap her, and then we're going to take half the money from the ransom to help you with your financial woes.
He makes a point of just saying, you can just fire him for incompetence.
Exactly.
Like, it doesn't matter who this bodyguard is. It's more just an insurance.
Another thing, and this is definitely hinted at in the movie, but it's said explicitly, Pita was in school, but she was taken out of school after a kidnapping happened around them, and the mum freaked out. And then we saw it in the deleted scenes. There's the first scene with the mum in deleted scenes is her basically saying, we need to get a bodyguard. It's a safety thing, but then I think there's also a prestige thing of having a bodyguard is like having a luxury car. Yeah. So that's why Mickey Rourke says this will keep your wife happy, about kind of have it as a token. Then it's hinted they want a bodyguard. Then we cut back to Denzel and Christopher Walken, and Christopher Walken says, you could be a bodyguard. And then they talk about that. And then there's the Mark Anthony interview scene, which is one of my favorite lines. Mark Anthony looks at his CV and basically says, you're overqualified. Why are you so cheap? And he just says, because I drink. And it's like, oh, cool. Yeah. And his reaction is really good. He just kind of looks out and he's like, so he's probably thinking, great, this is even better because it means that he's really not going to be able to do anything about the kidnapping. So I mentioned the CV. You can't see it fully, but there's like a couple of screenshots. So I took the screenshots, put it in ChatGPT, and got it to print it out. So it says some of these things don't make a lot of sense because obviously someone's just made it and they thought no one would be such a weirdo as to actually look at it. So it says school, French Foreign Legion Jungle Commando, French Commando, Dutch Urban Sniper. So in the book, he was in the US Army, and I think he punched an officer who sent the squadron into a really dangerous situation. A bunch of people died. So he was obviously dishonorably discharged, and then he joins the French Foreign Legion. There's no hint about the dishonorable part, because here they're basically honoring the book by saying about the French Foreign Legion, but then there's loads of stuff here about joint counter-surveillance, special operation, cable force, defensive instructor, and working at Quantico. So it never actually says CIA anywhere explicitly, but basically this all hints at the fact that he worked in Black Ops and like government affiliated and just like really this is in 2004. We're in the war on terror, so it's like some really bad stuff. And there's some of the stuff here is about upon completion of his tour with the 3rd Force Reconnaissance, Mr. Creasy was assigned to develop a highly specialized firearm training defense. This school, the high-risk personnel combat course, was designed to teach high-threat counter-terrorist activities using pistols, shotguns, rifles, and foreign weapon systems. So
how convenient.
Yeah. And then there's a bunch of other stuff. But basically everything here is to say that this guy is an absolute killing machine. Yeah. ChatGPT's analysis was that this is actually like overqualified to the point of myth. and a mix of real things like Quantico or Force Recon, and then fictional things. Yeah, there's at one point it says that he did off-road instructor at Land Rover University, Arizona. I checked, there's no such thing as a Land Rover University. But yeah, and it's basically the film telling you this guy is the worst possible person to piss off. Exactly like the whole John Wick vibe, when everyone's like, the Baba Yaga. So he gets the job, goes to the house, meets the wife and daughter. That you enjoy the thing there with the drink.
Yeah, because the dad's like, don't tell my wife you drink. And when they arrive, he's like, I'll have a Jack with water, as if to make it a bit more like socially acceptable. But the wife goes and just pours him a Jack Daniel's straight. And it's one of those subtle details, I guess we'll talk about later, which I think helps to elevate the movie.
Absolutely. So Pita meets him, and then when she's being tucked in that evening, she describes to her mum that he looks like a sad bear, which begins the whole Creasy Bear theme. This is the mini, I call this the mini Jack Daniels and gun sequence, because it doesn't go full on like it does later with Blue Bayou, but you do see him drinking and playing with his gun in his bedroom, just kind of showing you how he is when he's by himself. Then it's not good. Then also he finds a bird, and this is a detail I only kind of really noticed and paid attention this rewatch, that he finds this bird, I think it's a parrot, in his room, and he frees it, and later on the bird comes back, and apparently the bird is supposed to symbolize sort of his spirit, and I think it's a bit of a forced metaphor, but I think it's the idea that when he lets the bird go, he's lost, doesn't know where home is.
He's a prisoner of his own,
something like that.
His own mind.
Yeah, but then when the bird comes back is when things start going better, and it's sort of like he's come back to like the life of the living. Interesting. Birds are a very easy thing to do metaphors with. And then he starts driving her to school. We have the first real chat between the two of them, and one of the key things which they do. This is where you miss it the first time, but they really go into the book, is that she wants to be friends with him, clearly. And he rebuffs her the first time. But rather than just being like, oh, I'm a cute kid and like I'm gonna be funny and stuff, she kind of speaks to him like an adult and asks him questions. And in the book, they really talk about how the thing that gets him interested is the fact that she's interested about the world and curious and also very innocent about stuff. So for example, one of the questions she asks him here, which is like, so how does being black affect being a bodyguard? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I think he says, only time will tell. But it's the sort of like, that's not the sort of question your average 8-year-old would ask. So I think that first chat goes down quite well, but it's on the way back from school that she kind of pushes him and tries to be more friendly with him, and then he has to say, I'm here to protect you, I'm not here to be your friend. I think it's an important part of the story, because if he was immediately, oh yeah, let's be friends, it would be a bit weirder.
Yeah, he's still like fresh off a boat, he's miserable, still depressed, still a full-on alcoholic, and he's given her the cold shoulder for the entire journey, and she just gets better. Yeah,
and I think he just understands that chances are he's only going to work there a few months, chances are something bad could happen to her, like there's a lot of reasons not to get attached to her. Plus, he doesn't want to. I think he even makes a comment that he's like not good with kids and stuff. But yeah, so he really puts her in her place, and then she get that first scary scene where she gets out of the car.
Yeah, he's like, oh.
Yeah. Even that one you rewatch sometimes, if you haven't watched it in a few years and you forget, you think, is she gonna go running in the streets? But also it shows that she's not completely stupid. Like I did realize she could have just climbed through the car and gotten into the back.
Yeah, but she was like making a point, but she's like trying to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, then the wife comes and sort of says like, oh, like she basically tries to confront him about it, but he says, I'm here to protect her, not to be a friend, and she basically agrees. They have a little conversation about the Bible. That's an interesting one there. Even though Pita does give him a crucifix in the book, up until then he's basically non-religious, and he doesn't really become religious, it's symbolic, whereas here there's a lot more religion in the movie, but Denzel's a very religious man, and in the behind the scenes they did say that it was kind of him who infused it, because he talked about it with Tony Scott, and obviously there are very biblical themes here of forgiveness and revenge and wrath and all that sort of stuff, so it does make sense, and it's kind of introduced here with his Bible. Then we have the Blue Bayou failed suicide Jack Daniels scene. So this is when I think they crank back up the visuals.
Yeah, they go new metal 2000s. Music video.
Is it 9 Inch Nails or something like that?
I can't remember, but it's intermixed with Blue Bayou. Yes. It sort of cuts in and out.
Yeah, it's a very stylized, cool scene.
It's one of my favorite scenes.
We'll talk about it more in the production, but an iconic Jack Daniels scene.
Yeah, iconic. Yeah.
For better or for worse. But yeah, so what happens is he's like all fucked up in the head, and he puts a bullet and he tries to kill himself basically, and the gun jams. And so he calls Christopher Walken and says, does this ever happen? And he's like, very rarely, but sometimes. I think they say that the bullets never lie.
Yeah.
And so he keeps the bullet for later on. Chekhov's bullet, you know it's going to come back at some point. But I also realized it's only on the last time Pita, so when he calls Christopher Walken, he's out in the rain. Also, Christopher Walken is so good there when Denzel asks him, like, oh, did I wake you up? And we've just seen him get woken up. He's like, no, I was watching TV. Like, he's just such a good friend.
Yeah, a great friend, yeah.
And he's a great character, as Christopher Walken usually is. But Pita does see him out in the rain on the call, so she kind of sees him at his lowest. Then they've got they have the drive where there's the car that's tailing them, which turns out to be the kidnapper scouting them out. And Pita takes down the license plate, which again shows that she's a smart girl, which I think is a nice little moment. Then there's the first swim meet where she's not very good. And then on the drive back, I guess this is probably the first step. He starts talking to her from a coaching point of view about, oh yeah, you're a fast swimmer, but you're slow off the block, so you need to work on that. And yeah, coach, you were talking about the range, like just Coach Denzel is like one of the best things in this movie.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Then these random things, but the TV journalist is introduced on TV briefly. Again, you wouldn't notice this the first time, but once you've seen it, you're like, oh yeah, we're going to see her later. The bird comes back, so now you know that things are better.
Yeah.
And they say something like, oh, sometimes freedom is just coming home or something like that. Parents go on the trip. This is something I listened to another podcast, and they had a nitpick, and they were like, why does the wife keep going away with Mark Anthony on these trips if they're so scared about her? Obviously, so the movie can happen.
Yeah.
But in the book, there's a bigger explanation that all these trips is to do stuff like secure financing or getting loans and stuff, and that she's kind of the queen of the social scene, and so she comes along to schmooze and stuff like that. So there is a purpose for her going away.
Because she is, in the book, she is like the alpha of the relationship, right? So she's the one who...
Yeah, they try to do that here, but as we'll talk about in the characters, this is where I think the movie and her performance fall a little bit short. And I do wish maybe I think because of how she is in the movie, it doesn't come across that she would be necessary to go on these trips for work purposes. But yeah, that's the reason why she goes. So then they have the swim training, which is a really cool scene.
Great scene, yeah.
With the bricks, and because he's basically training her to react better to the gun. And
not fear the bullets.
Exactly.
To get off the block.
And it's the sort of thing, I don't swim, but I actually have a friend of mine who's going to come on the podcast actually to do Snatch, but his daughter, who's actually probably maybe she's a couple of years older, but she's a serious swimmer, and I'm going to be like, she needs to watch
the scene on
watch the scene.
And you'll be a super fast swimmer.
And then so that's like they're getting good, and then this is my favorite scene of the whole film. So the scene where it starts off with her asking what a concubine is, which is in the book, and he explains it's kind of like a wife, and then she goes, well, the Emperor of China had 1,000, and then they make a little joke about how, oh god, that's a lot of work for a man to have.
I think she says, like, could you imagine 1,000 of my mum or something?
Yeah, exactly. And so they do that. He smiles, and then it's just such a touching moment where she goes, Creasy, you smiled, and he's like, no, I didn't smile. And this is the reason why to me this scene is the beating heart of the movie, because just that moment you understand everything that happens in the second half. And she's perfect. She's cute and childish, but also not like an infant. She's being serious. She understands what's happening.
So super emotionally intelligent.
Exactly. But aware. He's playing it perfectly where he is, he does smile and laugh. But then when she says you smiled, he pretends to be like, no, I'm not. But you can also smile. But you can see that he's not actually getting mad about it. It's all a joke. And then he's like, no, I didn't smile. 5 seconds ago. And it's like, but 5 seconds ago was that. It's like, 10 seconds. Okay, maybe. And then, it's just, he hits like 3 or 4 dimensions of his range. She's perfect. And apparently there are scenes that were improvised between the two of them. Yeah. And it kind of feels like that one must have been, because it's so pure.
It definitely has that energy where to have it scripted, it would just feel a bit.
Yeah, it would be really
straight cuts and a bit.
I think it's the sort of thing you'd be like, we need an emotional moment here. So I'm sure, because the concubine question is in the book, so I'm sure that was scripted. And then they were like, we just need you to do what comes naturally.
Yeah, and then she asks about, oh, Creasy, have you ever had any girlfriends? And he's like,
that's ancient history.
That's ancient history.
Yeah.
What was your girlfriend's name? Nonya.
Yeah.
Nonya business.
Yeah. One interesting detail is that usually in movies they don't necessarily film chronologically just for scheduling purposes, but they thought it was so important about their relationship to evolve that they actually tried to film most of it chronologically, so that as the film progresses, the two of them are actually getting more comfortable to being together. Mm-hmm. And so even like the ending, which they probably filmed near the end, it really feels like these are two people that have this special connection.
Yeah.
So that is my favorite scene. Then there's more swim practices. The parents come back with the dog, which I realized the dog serves no purpose in the movies.
I think it mostly was there to to show how weak the dad was, because he's like, oh, the dog's called Sam, like your dad. It's like it's such a weasel. I think
Yeah.
that's the only sort of purpose of that scene is to
Yeah.
sort
So another thing about the Sam, in the book, the girl is called Pinta because she's Italian.
okay, yeah.
So they change it to Pita here, which sounds more Mexican. In the 1987 one, the girl is called Sam. So the dog is seen as also an homage to the 1987 movie. They do homework together, which again is cute. More swimming than the swim race, which is a great scene. The actual race. It's the sort of thing, like, it could have been nothing, but it's just filmed really well. It looks cool. It's gritty. In the book and movie, it's running, it's not swimming. But Tony Scott, I think it was his niece, was in a swim meet, and he saw it around the time that he was in pre-production. And he's like, we need to get swimming in this movie. And I think it is a lot more effective swimming than if she was just running.
yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
Also, it introduces the theme of water, and the fact that later on when he's doing on the rampage, he goes into swimming pools sort of at his way to decompress. So it kind of creates an association between her and water, which is obviously fire, the opposite. So there's a lot. You can go quite deep on all the themes. Then they go out for lunch with Christopher Walken. She gives him the necklace as the present, the saint of
It's Saint Jude, patron saint of
lost causes. That's it. Yeah. So again, more religion. And then that night he's by himself in the room, and he chooses his Bible over the bottle of Jack Daniels, which
Not
is
a good
obviously
look for Jack Daniels.
you can't compete with God. They were probably just happy they didn't try and shoot himself again while drinking Jack Daniels. This isn't an important scene, but the dad is doing his stupid golfing thing on the golf simulator. But yeah, one of the things that's quite tragic there is that Peter tells him that she wants to take swimming more seriously over piano, and he insists that she goes to piano, which you realize is horrible because they've obviously planned to kidnap her around the piano lesson. So he had an out of stopping it, and he doesn't take it. Then they go to the piano lesson. This is another thing, because it comes right before such a big scene. It's easy to miss it. But she tells Denzel Washington during the drive, she's like, I don't want to do piano, so how do I get out of this? And he says, what you need to do is just burp all the time. And then I only noticed this last rewatch, is that then during the lesson, he's sitting outside, and you can hear the burping from.
He just, the instructor keeps going, Peter.
Yeah.
Peter.
Also, fun fact is that she wasn't able to belch herself, so she had to have a belch stunt person do it for her.
Cute.
She comes out of the lesson, and then the kidnapping happens, which is... It's weird to say that it's a favorite scene, because it's obviously unpleasant, but it's a critical scene in the movie.
It's a great scene. Like the build up as well, when he starts to like connect the dots and he sees the police car block the road, and then he's sort of starting to look around
And him just getting shot like 4 times in the chest. I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, well, surely he's dead. So it's a bunch of police come. I think he kills the 4 police officers who were corrupt. But then the 2 kidnappers, including the guy with the glasses, this is another like little detail that I really like, especially with all the blurriness. It's hard to sometimes identify people who aren't known actors. But right at the beginning, when they do the intro, you see the guy with the golden glasses.
Oh, really?
And then and he's always in the same car. I think you see him when they get the license plate. But then you clearly see him when the kidnapping, the golden glasses again. So then later on, when he has him tied up with the fingers in the car and you see the golden glasses, you know he's the golden glasses guy. So I think that's a good detail.
But in terms of the kidnapping scene, I think the most emotional part of that is when Peter's on her own for a couple of seconds and she's just having like a panic attack. Like my heart like sank. I always had tears in my eyes. It was so like emotional. She's just there like shocked. It's like so intense.
But and then I don't know if it's the last point or if she does it multiple, but that's when she does the Creasy scream, and she just does it so perfectly. Like it's a screech, but it's not annoying to the ears. It's just heart-wrenching, and they use it over and over and over again afterwards because he keeps hearing that scream, because obviously that's what you would. But yeah, so he passes out, wakes up in the hospital. He's initially arrested because he killed 4 cops. But then we're introduced to Miguel, who's the police officer, and Maria, who's the journalist that we saw before. But he's basically an honest cop who's going to protect him. He doesn't really have any trouble I think he's not going to get in trouble for killing the cops because they were known to be corrupt. But the key is to protect him because the other corrupt cops might want to kill Creasy in revenge. So that's why they end up taking him out of the hospital a little later to recover.
Yeah, because the part about killing the cops is that it complicates things for the lawyer and Sam, right? Because they wanted to not get the police involved, sort out the ransom, but because they'd killed 2 police officers, was that part of...
I don't think so. I think the police were always going to get involved in some way because it's
from a negotiation perspective.
I think the only thing about the cops being killed is just the idea. So in the book, there aren't cops involved. That he just kills a few of the kidnappers. And I think obviously corruption is an even bigger problem in Mexico. So I think it just wanted to highlight that and make the fact that the cops are basically the bad guys in this movie. So
which they are.
Yeah, they absolutely are. I love when he shows him so at one point when he's in the hospital, the Miguel, the good cop, asks him about a bunch of photos, and Denzel goes, well, maybe you should show me some pictures of police officers. And he says, those are all corrupt police officers. But yeah, I think there you clearly see the sunglasses guy in the lineup.
Yeah, he pauses when he's looking at it. He's like, obviously taking the details down.
Yeah, even though he's like half dead, he's still working. And so I think they go back and forth between Denzel's sort of recovery and so they try to do the ransom money for her and it fails. So there's a bunch of money, I think it's $10 million US, which is supposed to be delivered by Mark Anthony's character. He puts it into a car. And then as he leaves, there's a shootout. And basically what's happened is that the police have wanted to take the money. They had some of their own guys ambush the guys who were coming to pick up the money, and they get into a shootout and they kill one of the head kidnapper, the voice as he's called. They kill his nephew, I think it is. So he's really pissed off. And supposedly then Pita gets killed because of the whole thing fell through, and everyone finds out about that and obviously is crestfallen. Here's an interesting point I wrote though. So even though there are shots of Denzel in his bed, he's pretty much either not in the movie or unconscious for, I timed it, 15 minutes from the time that he's dead to the time that he's actually out of bed and moving around again. And I realized it's not immediate, but the movie just feels different when he's not in it. You're like, oh, this is just a normal movie right now, and it should be exciting because there's ransom being paid, there's shooting. Like, it's not like it's boring. It's not like it's just people talking. But the movie just completely changes because he's no longer in it, and it's almost like it's almost like it's gone into black and white from a color movie because it just realized that without Denzel Washington, this is just a 3 out of 5 decent movie with average actors. And then as soon as he's back, he's just so magnetic and everything.
Oh, definitely, I agree. Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting that that's actually the most boring part of the movie because he's not in it, despite exciting stuff happened. Then they introduced the concept of La Hermandad, the brotherhood, which Hermandad means brotherhood. Oh, okay. So it's like the brotherhood.
Right.
Classic Americanism. Christopher Walken drives him away, thinks that maybe he's just going to go back to the US. I think he says, we're going to drive you to a military base, they'll take care of you. And he's like, I'm not going. I think he's not totally sure on what he's going to do at that point. But then he goes back to the crime scene, meets the journalist who says, I'll help you. She's obviously becomes very useful to him. And I think that's when he says, okay, if I have some help, maybe I can figure this out. Goes back to the house.
Yeah, so you reckon the journalist is one who planted the seed in his head in terms of going on a revenge spree, or he already had that intention?
I think he's told Christopher Walken he's not leaving because he needs to find out. Yeah. But then I think if he hadn't met the journalist, he would kind of been at a dead end because he tried to write down the license plate himself, but I don't think he got it, whereas she did. But obviously the license plate is kind of useless if you don't have someone that's going to look it up for you. So I think when he met her, then his wheels started turning. He's like, okay, I really need to find it because she'll help me. So he goes back to the house, gets the diary, and then he's kind of off to the races. He speaks to the wife there, and that's when he tells her, that's when he states it, I'm going to kill them all. Anyone who breathed, everyone who profited, every single person, I'm going to kill them all. And then one of my other favorite scenes is that when he buys all the guns, it's very much like in the Matrix, guns. Lots of guns.
Like a weird looking arms dealer, and this is like a random child looking over the whole deal.
And again, it's very stylized there. Mexico. Yeah. And every weapon that you see, he uses at some point. So you see the pistols, you see the rifle that he uses at the rave, you see the rocket launcher, you see the grenades, and you see the charge. It's just a fleeting thing, but the chargers, little plastic things.
Charger pods.
Yeah, you see those, and you're like, uh-oh.
What a scene.
And if you haven't seen the movie in a while, you're reminded, that's gonna hurt. So that's a kind of a foreshadowing of all the killing he's about to do. It gets the kidnapper's license plate, finds the glasses guy, ties him up. First major torture scene.
I forgot how good this scene is because they play the radio and it's like this happy-go-lucky music and you're just torturing him, like interrogating him. And then Hey Mickey comes on. Hey, the Spanish version of Hey Mickey. Hey Mickey, ¿cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás? Hey Mickey.
Very, very different vibe.
He's just like, I'm cutting your fingers off, but having a good time.
And we're introduced there to a lot of things. So they were just the kidnappers and they passed the kids on to the guardians, which will be the next step. He starts doing the whole, I'm just a professional. Denzel doesn't say anything back there, but this guy says, I'm just a professional. Initially, he tries to be like, oh, you don't know who I am and stuff, cuts one finger off, cauterizes it with the thing.
Okay, I know who I am now.
Yeah. Then he cuts, and I think then he starts giving information. This is why I've heard this in other movies where they talk about the right way to torture people, and cutting someone's fingers is a great one, especially the cauterization, because you have so many ways of doing it. Like you have 10 exactly. You have 10 goes, and if you really want, you can go for the toes. And it's the fact that, and they always do this in movies, especially for drama, is at first they won't say anything, so you give them a first taste, and they'll give you a little something and hope that it satisfies you, and then they ask for the really important stuff. It's like, no, I can't. It's like, okay.
Yeah,
and then he cuts off.
Yeah.
I also love that he didn't even go for the third finger. He's like, no, I need to escalate this, and he just takes a bit of his ear off, and then he finally has all the information, gives him his final cigarette, and then then he has one of his best lines where he says, on to the next life for you, and you will not be alone.
How do you feel about him when he's finished in the scene? He shoots the guy in the head and then lets the car roll off. Would you have preferred it if he was like still alive and the car had gone off a cliff?
That is a great point.
That would be like viewer to direct that scene. I think most directors would have it.
Yeah, I know
because his hands are tied to a wheel, and it's like, oh, he can't control the car, but he's in control, sort of.
So I think that is meant to show that despite everything Denzel does at most of these people, he does end up showing some form of mercy to them.
Yeah,
like
gets it done and over with.
Exactly.
Sort of,
and I think stylistically, if he was still in it, you'd have had to have a shot of him in the car as it went over. Exactly, and almost a bit goofy. So I think this was good.
That's fair,
Plus, this guy suffered enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was the scene that really despite the fact I think the Charger scene is the most iconic one later on
by far.
But when I was rewatching it, I think maybe last year, I'd forgotten about the Charger scene. This was the one that I remember as a kid, because obviously you don't actually see him blow up. The Charger one, it's the idea of it that's crazy. Obviously that's the explosion, but here it's actually seeing someone having their fingers cut off as you're being tortured. It is more visual.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, there's something about the gold glasses, because he's wearing them the whole time, which kind of just adds something to the visual of the whole scene. So this person is an awful person who kidnaps kids that then die, and God knows what happens to them. And yeah, it's just, like we were saying in the intro, it's just fun to watch bad people get hurt.
Oh, definitely. So satisfying.
Oh, yeah, one of the funny things is that, so obviously he gave the license plate to the journalist gave it to the cop, and then the cop funneled the information back. And he obviously knows that he did that, and then when you see him find the blown up car, look at the plate, and he's like, oh shit, what have I done?
Shit's going down. He just puts the paper away, walks off.
Exactly. Then he has his first swimming pool bleeding session, which I've Googled this. It looks really cool, and there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of metaphor about how he's the man on fire who's relaxing in the water, and it might give you very slight pain relief, but it would be a terrible idea to do that, because you would just bleed more, and so it doesn't make much medical advice. So if you're bleeding, do not go into a swimming pool. And then there's the rave, which this whole thing was filmed in one night, apparently, because they only had the location. And it's like a 5-6 minute scene.
Yeah, it's decent. It's not up there for me.
It's not up there, but
it works.
It's cool.
It's functional.
Yeah. And these three people, they're basically the people who babysat the kidnapped victims.
Yeah, it's like a holding cell for
$200 a week to do that. Like, that's fucking, when you know the amounts of money they're being ransomed, that's fucking crazy. So he kills the two men. This is something I realized. So he doesn't kill the woman because she brings him to the little girl who's been recently kidnapped, and he saves her. So I think he spares that woman whenever we're not shown. So he doesn't actually kill any women throughout the whole rampage, which is interesting. I think if it was made today, or like in the Netflix series, I think you've got to kill some bad women as well, like feminism. But back then, I think
equal rights.
Yeah, but I mean, I do think back then it was a different time, and it was probably seen as a little bit untasteful if you killed women. But you know what? There is plenty of women who are part of like these crime organizations as well. But one of the things I found really funny is that when he's about to blow up the rave, when he's about to blow up the club, he goes out on the dance floor and shoots his gun, and it takes the first time I was like, yeah, and I think the second one, some people start moving, but even on the third one, people are moving, but they're still dancing at the same time. And luckily he gets everyone out, because that's the thing, he manages to do all this without killing any innocents. If he'd blown up a nightclub full of people, that would have been a slightly
you'd have to be really confident with your timing in terms of burning those chemicals in that storage.
But he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, he's a pro.
So saves that girl, gives her to the journalist, has the debit card. That's it. He uses the debit card, gives that to the journalist as kind of the next step.
Yeah. 4747. That's
Yeah,
a pin
I
code. You've got to
remember it too.
remember the pin code.
I was going to put that in the quiz, but I thought maybe too hard. But yeah, I just think AK-47.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
Did he only get the card, or the Guardians give him any other information? Oh no, that's it. The Guardians, because he asked, well, how did she die? And they basically say because 3/4 of the money was missing.
Yeah.
He got angry, and then he's like, well, why was the money missing? And they say because of corrupt cops. And that's when he pieces together the fact that, okay, so he goes after Fuentes, the head of the police, the corrupt police. I think he's specifically in charge of the anti-kidnapping division, which is particularly bad.
Yeah.
So she goes after him, but also gives the card to the journalist so that she can look into it. That comes back later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he uses a rocket launcher because they say this guy is like more protected than president, and he takes care of it. Well, he takes care of him with the rocket launcher.
The journalist says, "Oh, he's more protected than the president," and he says, "Oh, he's going to need it."
Yeah, exactly. I did read somewhere that apparently you can't shoot a rocket launcher from inside. That you need to be out.
Yeah,
the
too
recoil
dangerous.
and everything. But you know what? It's a great scene.
It's a movie.
It's
a movie.
Obviously, this movie is unrealistic. But this is the one thing that stuck out to me. That like the flaw in his plan is that if anything had gone wrong in that bit, because he shoots the rocket launcher and then casually walks down the building and goes like I feel like he could have gotten away, but obviously he doesn't. But yeah, so he gets him. Second major torture scene. I love the fact that the scene starts and Denzel is wearing the gloves, which again, the first time you watch it, you don't think about it, but then you rewatch it, you're like, oh yeah, because he was in his butt. This the fingers and the charger are both in the book as scenes, which I thought was interesting that they didn't make that up. Especially even the book was so much older. But in the book, they actually describe the guy. He used a rocket launcher, the same thing. And the guy talks about how his pants get pulled down and he starts feeling someone touching his bottom, and then he gets knocked out, and then he wakes up. Because obviously in a book you can talk more about how people from a first person, and then he talks about waking up and feeling a pain in his body but not understanding where it comes from. So this guy is the head of the corrupt. This is one of my favorite things when he says that, oh, have you heard of La Hermandad? It's like, I'm the president of La Hermandad, and Denzel goes,
you're the president?
Yes.
The president? Wow.
Like, that's when he's being like training day. He's like, oh shit, good for you, brother. Yes, then he gets all the information. He finds out so they went in to take some of the money, but they found that basically there was supposed to be $10 million in the ransom, but they took $5 million for Sam Ramos for his financial things. Mickey Rourke took $2.5 million. And so they basically put $2.5 million real, 3/4 of it being fake. Now, the kidnappers knew that they would be taking half of it, so they expected that, but they didn't expect to be ambushed. So the ambush comes. It's not clear if they take the 2.5 and then a 2.5 fake, or if they took everything or whatever, but they're obviously pissed off about finding out the fake money.
Yeah, because there was a small scene where Fuentes is like opening the back, he's like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. But so here this is when we find out that there was something dodgy going on before that even happened. And I think he says who handled the money. Oh, it was Mickey Rourke's character. So he's like, okay, well, he's the next one. I think he probably gets some other information. And then blows him up with his butt in. Have you ever seen A Lonely Island? Cool guys don't look at explosions.
It is one of the best, like, walk away from explosions.
There are actually quite a lot, but yeah, this has got to be one of the best ones, and it's just it's so good. Then he goes to Mickey Rourke's house, finds him beheaded. There, I don't think it was in the deleted. Was it in the deleted scenes? Him cutting his head off?
It is in the deleted scenes, but they don't the movie. They don't insinuate who actually killed the lawyer.
But he says it later. He says, "I killed him."
He says it later. Yeah.
But yeah, we watched the deleted scenes yesterday, and we found a lot of them. Either they were like, "This is fine," or they really added nothing. So, given the movie is still 2 hours and 25 minutes, I think they did some good things cutting. Those out.
I mean, not seeing him be killed works.
Well, yeah. Also, you don't
fine
first watch. You still don't know the dad is involved. Whereas if you saw him doing it there, you would know. But the important thing is at Mickey Rourke's house, he finds the fax machine showing the bank transfers between Mickey Rourke and Mark Anthony. Then he goes to them, sits them both down, and then breaks it to them about what happened. And Mum is not happy.
Oh, she's pissed.
Yeah.
Rightly so. I mean, it's a relatively intense scene, Creasy. He actually accuses the wife almost.
He says, "Are you in on this?" I know. I think it's fair at this point to just check.
And then he realizes straight away she's not, and then he just goes for Samuel and he just lets him have it. And then the end of the scene, which is for me, it's like my favorite part of the scene, is when he's obviously praying in front of the candles, and he comes along with his gun and his bullet, and he says, "Oh, it didn't work for me, but it may work for you," and he just walks off, and then bye-bye.
We'll talk about this more in the Mark Anthony character. But he has the goal to try and defend himself. He tries to say, "Oh,
It's my daddy's fault.
It's my dad's fault.
Fuck you, Dad.
Yeah, I did it.
I hate you.
I did it for us." And yeah, because in the Mark Anthony interview, he talks about how, yeah, he's obviously a flawed character, but he loves his family, he loves his daughter. And I'm like, no, Mark Anthony, if you love your daughter, really, you don't let her get kidnapped.
Did you read the script, sir?
Yeah. So then Miguel, the police guy, gets the photo of the voice, because that's it. They've, using the credit card, they've traced it back to the wife of the voice.
Yeah.
And they managed to get into the house pretending to give cholera vaccines, I think it is. And so they managed
the house,
and they managed to steal a picture of him. So they have the picture, which they put in the newspaper, but they know where it is, so Denzel can go. Also, at one point, because one of the things people have said is like, why? Because obviously the journalist is on the case. Why wouldn't you just kill her? So I went to the last rewatch thinking about that. But the big thing is that she has the photo that she's going to put in the newspaper, and they ambush her and they say, don't publish the photo or else. And I was like, actually, it's smarter to do that, because if you just kill her, she's not going to stop the photo from being published.
Yeah, it'll be
Whereas
released.
if you intimidate her, maybe there's a chance. But she isn't intimidated.
No.
One of the things, though, the driver, so they ambush her.
And kneecap
her
him.
fucking driver gets shot in the
Yeah,
kneecap, which is an
brutal.
injury you do not come back from. And you never see him again. You're like, oh, poor guy. Like, why didn't they shoot her in the kneecap? So Denzel Washington finds the brother of the voice on the police surveillance. There's a little bit of a shootout. Denzel is careful there, because there's the wife of the voice who's pregnant, and he doesn't shoot her. The brother uses that, tries to escape, crashes. Denzel pulls him, brings him up to the roof, and then calls the voice. I think he's basically saying that he would, because at this point he doesn't know Peter's alive. I guess his plan was to basically say, you need to come here to save your family, and then so he could kill him. But he tells him that Peter is alive. Can't remember at what point he blows his hand off, but yeah, he shoots the brother's entire hand off.
He's like, oh, I think your brother wants a word, and then he just boom. It's like,
Which again, his brother is an absolute like slimy piece of shit.
Another weasel. Yeah.
Another funny bit here, which again you blink and you miss, is that the wife starts pulling like bagged up money out of like the.
I don't want your money.
Yeah,
I don't want
exactly.
your money.
And then that's it. The voice says like, "What do you?" I think that's what causes him to shoot it. The voice says, "Oh, how much money do you want?" And he's like, "No, let me show you that this isn't about money," and shoots his hand off. And then he tells him Peter's alive, and then says, "Life for a life." So I don't know. This is a nitpick. What do you think of the deal? Do you think it was a good idea to take this deal, the life for the life, or should he have just said, "No, you give me the girl, or I'm going to execute your brother and your wife who's pregnant with your kid"?
I think in terms of the emotional aspect of the movie, they had to do, like, he sacrificed himself. But in terms of the deal, you just think you just swap the brother for the girl.
Because he says
That's
at one point,
fair.
he says your brother for the girl, and he's like, no. Because he says a life for a life. Because I guess what he's saying, and he's right here, is that if I give you the girl and you give me my brother, you're still going to come after my life. So by you giving yourself up, it means that I'm going to be free. Because I think he says that in the deleted scene. He says, "I'll get my life back by you being dead." So it's not so much that he wants to kill Denzel Washington, but by killing Denzel Washington, he gets rid of the threat.
But he gets like a 2-for-1 almost.
Kind of,
Which
yeah.
is like not a great negotiation.
But here's my
position,
view.
but...
Yeah, but here's what I think is that let's just say they traded the brother for Peter. Then the voice would disappear and he would never get to him. Whereas I think Denzel's idea was that if he survived long enough to get to the voice, he would find a way to kill him. It's either that or he knows he's gonna die anyway because his wounds are getting worse. Because he gets shot again by the brother in the house. So he gets shot a fifth time and he's still bleeding everywhere. It's one of the two or a bit of both. He's like, if I can get far enough.
I mean, also, if you're a bodyguard working in Mexico City and you've already been shot, like, put on a Kevlar vest, man. Like, that's one of my gripes of this movie.
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
You bought all these weapons and bombs and stuff, like, buy a vest, man.
Yeah, that's a good one. We'll just finish off and then we'll talk about the alternate ending because that ties into what we're saying. So, life for a life, they go to the bridge. That setting is beautiful. Obviously, the road's a bit shit, but the active volcano in the background is super cool.
One of the best visual shots is when he's approaching the bridge. You know, he's just going up the side, crosses over, beautiful backdrop. This bridge now.
Yeah, it's so it's close. It's in Mexico, obviously. It's the mountain is called Popocatépetl, and it's an active volcano which apparently had erupted like that morning or something, which is how all the clouds look super cool and everything. And then they do the trade, super emotional moment, and then he dies in the car, and then we're showed that the voice is killed. That same, because they put the dates, that same day, the Miguel guy, obviously, it's not exactly clear how, but they tracked him down somehow. Yeah. And he shoots him in the swimming pool. So, did you didn't know about the alternate ending until last night?
No, I wasn't aware of the alternate.
So the alternate ending, it basically has it's everything that happens there, but instead of him dying in the car, he gets brought to the voice's house, and then they chitter chatter. The voice says some stuff about how hard his upbringing was and blah 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 blah. But then basically Creasy touches his watch and then everything blows up. So the implication is that he stuck the charger up his own ass in order to kill the voice.
Yeah, it would have ruined the vibe of the movie if that was
Some people have said that, but I do think that the idea of him doing that in order to kill the voice tracks.
Yeah.
But I do think they chose the better ending.
Yeah, definitely.
I think thematically, it would have been completely fine. It would have been on trend with the movie. But in terms of the emotionality, the idea of him just giving up his life, by doing it the way it did, it's like he gave up his life to save her. Whereas if you go on the alternate ending, it's the idea that he gave up his life to kill this guy. And that's much less poetic. So the TV show, we watched the trailer. What do you think of it?
It's no from me. I mean, I think it took us less than 10 seconds to realize it's probably not.
It hasn't got any of the style. It
just got the charm. It looks like it's too much studio set action. Like the set scenes didn't look particularly great.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it looked cheap, but it looked like The Night Agent, these other Netflix shows, whereas the whole point of Man on Fire is that it's so stylistically unique. There was none of that.
No.
I also think the actor, I'm sure he's going to be fine, but he's never going to fill the shoes of Denzel.
No,
he's a lot younger, so it's a different thing. I'm not filled with confidence for it.
I'm not going to rush to watch it.
I'm definitely going to watch it, and I'll be putting a video up on YouTube talking about it, but I'm going in with very low expectations. Yeah. Low expectations, but I'm not saying that I'll be like, oh, it was fine, because I'm expecting it to be bad, but the bar for it to be good is really high. So a few things on the differences between the 1987 movie and this one. It's a fascinating comparison of two films that roughly have the same bones, because obviously they're the same source material, but are totally diametrically opposed in terms of execution. The 1987 one was boring looking versus this one being flashy and daring with the way it looks. This one is deeply emotional, whereas in the last one, it's an 80s movie, and I think it was a thing there that it was basically a show don't tell. So rather than going into any of his PTSD, there's just so many shots of Scott Glenn just like looking off into the distance and like being morose and all that sort of stuff.
Very 80s.
Exactly. But it's very surface level. And then the relationship, because the whole relationship between Creasy and Pita, like done wrong, it could be creepy, and in the 87 one, it's borderline creepy. The violence it just feels gratuitous in the 87 version versus being fascinating and warranted in this one. And then the casting, Joe Pesci of all people plays the Christopher Walken character in the 87.
Really?
But is like very bland.
Yeah.
And I think the Scott Glenn who played, do you know who Scott Glenn is?
No, I don't think so, no.
So Scott Glenn has been in a bunch of stuff. Did you watch Daredevil, the original one?
No, I haven't. No.
So he's in that as Stick. He was in White Lotus as Jim Hollinger in the last one. He's been in a bunch of stuff. Yeah. He's like a career actor, but he's decent at playing a certain thing. But he didn't have the depth and the range of Denzel Washington. So I think if you're a huge fan of the 2004 movie and just out of interest, like if maybe you think you're reading the book, you should also go back and watch the 1987, because it's one of those that'll make you appreciate the 2004 even more, because you're like, oh, this is our shit version of it. But the funny thing is that on the surface, the 87 one feels like it's a lot more faithful to the book because it takes place in Italy. But actually, it doesn't use any of the lines, and a lot of the best lines in this, we'll talk about this in the dialogue, are actually from the book, which is really cool, and that's why the book is so good. And then there's a lot of the detail from the book that is transposed into the 2004 one, but it's completely left out in the 87. A simple thing is the whole dad being in on it is not in the 87 thing, whereas it absolutely is in the book. So yeah, on the surface, 87 version seems faithful, but in fact it's not. And so now, putting aside the 87 one, now I'm going to give you 6 main differences between the original book and the 2004 movie. So the first major one is obviously the fact that this takes place in Italy in the book, whereas here they moved it to Mexico. As we said before, it's because back when the book was written, when it takes place, kidnappings in Italy were extremely common, whereas by the time 2000 came around, they would have had to make the movie take place in the past, and that's not what Tony Scott wanted to do. So change of location, but like you say, it adds a whole other vibe factor, because if you had that stylistic thing in Italy, it would have been very different.
Yeah, and I think with mafia, the Italian mafioso, it's sort of now seen as a archaic sort of criminal organization, where in Mexico, it's literally that kidnappings still happen it could happen tomorrow. There's probably going to be kidnappings. You know?
Absolutely. And the other thing I think is that because it takes place, everyone knows the cartels are the most vicious criminals in the world.
Yeah.
You know, short of like raping someone. Creasy can pretty much do whatever he does, and it's never going to seem like he's going too far.
No.
Whereas I feel like, especially, you know, the mafia did terrible things back in the day. But if you had a movie coming out in the 2000s showing, I mean, this is maybe a bit borderline racist of the fact that it's like, oh, white criminals wouldn't do certain things, whereas like let's in America they might. But it basically gave them free range that he can like chop people's like hands off and stick stuff up their butt, and it's like doesn't matter. In the book, as I mentioned, he was kicked out of the US military and then was in the French Foreign Legion, but then was also a mercenary. So he did a lot of really bad stuff. Like I think the bad stuff they talk about is definitely hinted at being a lot worse in the book than it was in the movie.
I mean, it's a reference at the start of the film where he's like, "Oh, how have you been?" He's like, "Oh, I've just been moving from place to place." Sort of, you know, like a transient sort of soldier of war.
Yeah, because on his CV it doesn't say what he's doing in the last few years, so it's unclear. But apparently he like was doing training and stuff like that. Another thing, this is a big one. So in the book, he sleeps with the mum. So they did this in a deleted scene that we saw yesterday. So there's basically a kidnapping nearby them that they're not involved in, and he protects her, sort of saves her life. That's pretty much beat for beat the same in the book and the deleted scene. In the book, that night she comes into his room and fucks him, and it's just kind of a thing that's never spoken of again, but it's obviously happened. Whereas in the movie, she fucks him in the car, which is not classy.
No.
And so we were very glad they took that out of the movie, and it wasn't necessary. No. But that's a big difference. Then, huge difference in the book. Spoiler if you're going to read the book. Pinta is killed, actually killed.
Oh, really?
And raped as well. So, like, very dark aspect there. So the book is kind of broken down into roughly 3 sections. There's a bit at the end about what happens afterwards, but there's main 3 sections. The first section is pretty much the first half of the movie. The third section is roughly the second half of the movie, but there's a whole middle section, because one of the things we didn't really talk about is the fact that I think he spends 1 month recuperating in the movie, right? I think that Miguel says he needs 1 month, but he's still obviously not at all recovered when he starts going on his rampage. Whereas in the book, because she's killed, obviously in the movie, he couldn't be waiting around for 6 months before going on his revenge tour because of the fact that because he thinks she's dead. But because she's alive, it needed to be somewhat quick. Yeah. Whereas in the book, because she's dead, he takes his time. He goes off to this island somewhere off the coast of Italy and basically recuperates and trains and gets his strength back. And there he falls in love with another woman and has like an affair with her. And there's like a whole thing about him finding a community and becoming friends. Have you seen Equalizer 3?
Yeah, that's very much.
I found
my home.
Exactly.
I drink coffee all day.
There's actually a lot of parallels between Equalizer 3 and the bits that are taken out of this. So I do actually wonder if they're inspired.
Especially when we watched the deleted scenes with the deleted scene of him killing the voice with the explosion, like the watch is very, that is very much Equalizer. Yeah. You know, I've got 30 seconds to kill this guy.
But yeah, so there's a whole other section that's not at all in the movie, and it does make a lot more sense. And also, not only does he recuperate, but his plan is a lot more planned. He doesn't kind of just go from person to person. He like has safe houses that the Christopher Walken character, because he's in the book as well, has set him up. You see him buying the weapons in France and then smuggling them back into Italy. And it's a very cool part of the book. And then finally, Creasy doesn't die at the end of the book because they wrote 4 more books.
Really?
Creasy book. Like it became this guy, AJ Quinnell, is obviously a good writer. He wrote a bunch of other stuff, but the main thing he's known for is writing the Creasy series. And I've actually ordered the second one, so I really enjoy these books and I'll be reading it for fun. But yeah, so that is the book versus the movie.
Yeah, fascinating.
Because when did you find out it was based on a book?
Probably not that long ago. I always just thought it was a movie, I guess.
I found out last week when I started doing my deep research. Yeah, most of the best movies you find out. Obviously, there's the obvious. There's your Harry Potters, Narnia, all that sort of stuff that are based on books. But movies that you did you know Jurassic Park was based on a book?
No,
I found that out recently. Like Limitless with Bradley Cooper is based on The Prestige, based on a book. A lot of great movies. I think it's a good way for ideas to be fully developed in book form, and then studios that way you can take all the good stuff out of a book, whether the book is good or bad, and then you can make it better or as good in film version.
It gives you a good baseline to then be like, okay, we can cut this scene, we can change this, and I mean, like you said, from a book, there are quite a few deviations in terms of the storyline.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the characters. I kind of go from least important slash good to most important slash good. Not exactly, but let's start with Samuel Ramos, played by Mark Anthony. What are your thoughts on him? Character and performance.
Performance, not really a standout performance. He plays the dad well in terms of he's quite a bit of a Weasley not soft guy, but
No, I think
soft. Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's a particularly notable actor, but for the character he plays him perfectly fine.
So Mark Anthony had been in 7 movies before Man on Fire, but has only been in 2 since. So he obviously, this wasn't a career-defining thing for him. He's fine, but yeah, he's a very successful singer. That's what he's known for.
Music videos and stuff.
Yeah, so I thought about this one a lot, and initially I think I would have put him as the weakest performance, but having read the book and understanding that the whole point is that this character is, exactly you say, a weasel, and arguably he's the worst person in the movie, because at least the voice talks about family being important.
Definitely worst father of a decade at least.
I can't really
your
think.
Child up for ransom. And...
Yeah, we didn't prepare that, but worst movie dad of all time.
He
could be up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think initially his performance might seem like it's a bit weak, but actually then when you realize that's the whole point of the character, to be weak, docile, manipulated.
It's a suitable casting.
Yeah,
it's not a great casting, but it's suitable. Yeah. It works.
I think he works really well. Yeah. And I said the funny thing was that in the interview, Mark Anthony talks about how the fact that he loves his daughter. It's like, I mean, yeah, on paper he loves his daughter, but you absolutely can't say that you love your daughter when you put her through something like that.
No.
There's a really interesting line in the book which explains it so perfectly, and it's a good segue to the next character, is that basically the point in the book is that this character is completely head over heels about the wife, and he worships the ground she walks on, and he never actually saw the daughter as his daughter, but he always saw the daughter as kind of an accessory to the wife. So it's like, all to make her happy because they'll make my wife happy. But he never really created a true father bond with her, which is one of the reasons why she develops it with Creasy. I think it's not supposed to be as sinister in the movie. Like, she says, like, oh, I love my dad, and he says he loves her and stuff. But obviously, they don't intrinsically have a strong bond in any way.
No, and especially the scene where they go on a business trip and he says goodbye to Peter. You can sort of tell it's like a half-hearted, like, I love you, but I don't really know yourself.
Yeah. But the thing that doesn't work is the fact that the wife, as you mentioned in the book, is meant to be this total badass who controls every room that she walks into, that has this man under her thumb, that always gets her way, that every man sees her, and she just doesn't give that.
They're a weak power couple with that, however strange that is.
Yeah, so I think she's the actual weak link of the movie, both because I don't think the performance is great, and because I feel like I'm referencing more the book than I'm meant to. But once you read it, you kind of understand what they were trying to do in certain ways, and how like the story is built. And it clearly, one of the building blocks is that she should be a stronger character.
Yeah, I mean, she's beautiful, but she hasn't got that alpha intensity of being like dominating.
And I think part of it, I think the way it's written, she could have been more alpha, but I just think she was miscast. Like and partly because the other thing is that she's obviously an American living with a Mexican husband in Mexico City, so she's a foreigner, so she's a fish out of water.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously in the book, it's that they're a fully Italian couple, so she's an Italian woman in an Italian family. And stuff, and so I don't know exactly how you fix that, because they obviously wanted to. I mean, no, they obviously made her American to appeal to the American audience, but they should have just made her, like, imagine a strong Hispanic woman in that role. Like I know she's Italian, but like Monica Bellucci is the person who came to mind about someone like that. Think of her in the Matrix movies. Like she is a strong character who, actually, that's a perfect analogy. Is that because she's with a very powerful man in that, the Merovingian, but she obviously is the one that's in control, and it needs to be realistic that he would have gotten the bodyguard to appease her. But also one of the reasons that he's in money trouble is because she's spending the money, and rather than reining her in, he's willing to do this crazy thing because he needs to upkeep the lifestyle that she's become used to.
Excuse me, honey, can you just not spend so much money? And actually, no, I'll just let our daughter get kidnapped.
Exactly. And so I think she was miscast. I think the fact that she's American in Mexico, I think her accent, because she's Australian, and her accent is all over the place. Like sometimes it's normal American, sometimes it goes really southern. You thought there might have been a reason to that.
Yeah, I mean, we were discussing earlier about how in the bedroom scene when everyone's been kicked out of the house and Denzel's in the bedroom and they come and she comes and talks to him and her accent becomes more thicker, and I thought southern. It was more southern. I thought it was her like more opening up to Creasy, but you just thought she was just a crap actress, and
Yeah,
voice
crap
acting-
actress is a bit harsh.
Voice acting skill wasn't as
I just
consistent.
think her accent wasn't consistent because
Because when they first meet, she's got very neutral.
yes, exactly.
And then in this scene, it's quite.
I think if you're
hey y'all,
yeah, exactly. If
my daughter's been kidnapped, y'all.
if you're gonna do that accent, you need to do it consistently all the way. For Rada Mitchell, before this, her biggest role was in Phone Booth with Colin Farrell, where she played his wife.
Yeah.
And then she was in Finding Neverland, where she played the wife. And then she's in Olympus Has Fallen and London Has Fallen, the Gerard Butler, where he's like the White House security. Do you want to guess what her role is in that?
Wife?
Yeah.
Oh
the
my
wife.
God.
Yeah. And she nothing major recently. One of the podcasts I listened to is like, oh, why wasn't she in more stuff? And I'm like, yeah, because she's
she's
not
beautiful.
actively bad,
No.
but she had an important role, and I don't think it lived up to the potential.
No.
I think Mickey Rourke as the lawyer is completely overqualified because apparently he did not want to be there. He
Really?
didn't get on with Denzel. He talks in the interviews about how he was smoking cigars all the time and got a bit high off them. So God knows what was in his cigars. But yeah, to me, that could have been anybody. You didn't need to have someone as famous as Mickey Rourke playing it.
I think he plays him okay in terms of he comes
I don't-
across as a jerk, like
Yes.
a dodgy businessman. He's quite big, he's smoking with cigars, but it's a very dispensable casting position, I think. You could get any sort of butch American guy smoking a cigar and he'll come across as like a sleazy
Absolutely.
lawyer.
The cop and journalist, I think they're fine. They're not.
Yeah.
I think that, they're good. They're good. But I'm not like.
I think I prefer the cop, Miguel. Is it
Miguel,
Miguel?
yeah.
I prefer Miguel more, but
Did you recognize? You know what else? You know what else we've seen him in?
no.
He's in He's in Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace, the James Bond movies.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah.
Then Christopher Walken. Now he is perfectly cast as Paul Ray. Just enough Christopher Walken. Like it's clearly him. He's not underplaying it,
Yeah.
but he's not going over the top.
Do you reckon they asked him to like?
Regulate? Give us 60%.
Yeah,
Because I mean, he's really good in Catch Me If You Can, but there he's really cranking it up to like 100.
Because in the movie he's sort of like a womanizer, but he's not like a.
I think though here's the way I see this character. He's meant to be. So yeah, he's definitely a womanizer, even though he's like happily married. But when he's in the park and stuff, you see him like checking out other girls and stuff. I think he's meant to be the version of Creasy if he had basically managed to get out of his funk post-military and stuff.
Yeah.
So like he's found, women and he's got a
I
family.
live like a king
yeah,
down here.
Joie de vivre he has. One thing, apparently Christopher Walken was initially approached to play the Jordan Kalfas character. But then when he read the script, he said, no, I'd rather play the Ray character, which I think was a good
Yeah,
shout.
definitely. Yeah.
And he's an important character. Like Mickey Rourke could not have played the Ray character. And I think it's important because it's from the get-go, it shows the more human side of Creasy.
I also like how Rayburn in this movie, he's quite mellow. They could have easily gone for the old boss because he's supposed
I don't
to be
think
like,
he's meant to be. Well, in the book, he's not his boss. They were they were on the same team and they were partners more than employees.
But he could have been cast as like another hardcore soldier
Yes.
of war, and he could have been like, "Oh, Creasy's he's a badass motherfucker," but like he's very mellow,
Yes.
especially the scene where he's talking about some men are artists, whether it's with food and Creasy's masterpiece is death.
Creasy's art is death, and he's about to paint his masterpiece.
which is a great line.
Yeah, a lot of the best lines are actually Christopher Walken says. With that bit in particular, he just shows that he has great insight into Creasy. He also explains in that scene the fact that she showed him it was okay to live again. And I think that's, to me, I see Christopher Walken that he was probably in a period of his life similar to what Creasy's like now, but then he met his wife, and she's the one that made it okay to him to live, and that's why he's this happy person.
Yeah.
So I think that's the tragedy part, is that if none of this had happened and he had stayed working for this family for years and he'd seen Peter grown up, down the line you can see that Creasy would have become what Christopher Walken is, which is just a happy, settled person that's managed to put all the bad shit they've done behind them.
Yeah, Rayburn's found his solace, and
Exactly.
he's in a happy place, and he sort of, I guess he wants the same for
which is
for
why he helps
Creasy.
him and stuff. Then Dakota Fanning. So to me, she's the MVP, most valuable player of the movie, because obviously Denzel is amazing. Denzel is he's scoring all, to use the basketball analogy, he's the one that's scoring all the points and everything. But the fact is, Denzel, you could put Bruce Willis in this movie, make him 80% as good as Denzel, and keep Dakota Fanning. This is still a really good movie. Keep Denzel Washington, put an average child actor instead of Dakota Fanning, the whole movie falls apart.
Yeah.
So she's the most important role, and she's absolutely 10 out of 10, 100%. She should have gotten at least a nomination for an Oscar for this role.
It's just scary how intelligent she is. Like when I was 8 years old, I was probably just picking my nose and like, scratching my ass and playing football. And like she's super intelligent. She understands the emotional sort of subtleties with their relationship.
Absolutely. So she was 9 in this, and she was cast because she was in I Am Sam, where she's also really good. It's with Sean Penn, where I think he plays someone who's slightly mentally disabled and is trying to get custody of her. So not as fun a movie as this. But that's the great thing about this movie, is that there's the serious stuff, but then there's also the fun stuff. Just some facts about her is that she was missing her front teeth in it, and they'd actually prepared the molds and everything to give her real teeth, but they decided at the end it would be more real because 9-year-olds do lose their front teeth.
Yeah, and her teeth are like still developing like adult teeth, and it adds to her like being a young.
Yeah. And you can just see in the interview, she reminds me of, you've seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right?
Yeah, I have, yes.
So the young actress who acts next to Leo, she's just got this, I think she might have even been younger than she was, but a very similar age. She's just got this maturity. It's almost like you took a 30-year-old actor and put them in the body of a 9-year-old.
Definitely, yeah.
And even there, and so that you know what to do, but then just one thing to know how to do, but then actually having the capability to do it. Yeah.
And especially the scene where they're having drinks. It's Rayburn, his missus, and Creasy and Pita, and she just seems so naturally comfortable in that scene. Yeah. As if she were an adult, just having another adult conversation.
Exactly, yeah. Because again, in the book, they obviously go more into her state of mind and the fact that she wants to be his friend, but then she realizes that it's not going to be easy, so she kind of approaches it from a more basically strategic point of view of, I'm going to ask him about history and stuff like that, because that way he'll respect me as an adult and he's going to let me in. And then obviously the whole swimming thing is really cool, and she's like very good at that. But then the thing about her is that you'd think, oh, she's going to grow up to be like the greatest actress of her generation. But she's had a perfectly respectable career. She was in the Twilight movie. She was in Ocean's 8. She was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that we were just talking about. And then the most fun is that she was in Equalizer 3 with her old pal Denzel.
Yeah.
Because those are made by Antoine Fuqua, who was actually offered to direct this.
But it's such a common theme with a lot of these child actors they have amazing careers as children, but when it comes to they enter puberty, and a lot of times they haven't got that magic, or they just lose
a lot of
charm, which obviously you have to have charm as a
lot of the time it's because like substance abuse and stuff like that, but then there's no sign of that with her. It just seems like her style of acting didn't quite grow with her. I think you alluded to it earlier with Denzel, but there's something about likability is so important, and she's so likable as a child. She's so charming, and like I feel bad saying this, but I don't feel like she's got that charm as an adult.
No.
In Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, she's really good, but she plays a really obnoxious character. Yeah. And I just kind of feel like anytime she was in Ripley, the Netflix adaptation of Talented Mr. Ripley, which is another amazing movie.
Great film, yeah.
And Dakota Fanning plays the Gwyneth Paltrow character from Talented Mr. Ripley in the Ripley TV show. And she's just not likable and stuff. So, but I think that's it's something it's one of the things that makes you a superstar. Is just kind of likability and charisma and stuff, and that's something that sometimes you have as a kid, and
you lose it sometimes when you enter your teenage years and become an adult. Yeah.
But you know what? She still had a good career, and having this on your resume, like that's amazing. And then like the center of the movie, Denzel Washington, shockingly wasn't the first choice.
Really,
not even second or third. So this movie was in development for basically decades. So Robert De Niro was attached to it for years, and you know what? I could see it.
Could have worked. Yeah.
I think he. I was thinking this when we were watching. So, and Russell Crowe was another one at the time. Yeah. So apparently Tony Scott contacted him and said, "Oh, Russell, would you be interested in this?" He gave him the synopsis, and he apparently, in a very Russell Crowe way, he said, "Oh, have you seen Proof of Life?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, I've been there, done that," and that was the end of the conversation. And so we watched Proof of Life last night, and I think he would have been good in this. But I don't think on the emotional stuff, the becoming friendly, I take him and Robert De Niro. I can see them doing it perfectly fine, but I just don't think it would have gone as deep. And if you just, even if the connection between the two of them is 10-20% less deep, it just kind of takes a whole layer of greatness off the movie. So,
like you highlighted when we watched Proof of Life, Russell Crowe, he can be quite expressive, but I think in terms of this movie, Denzel does a much better job. The expressions are much more subtle and.
I think I think Russell Crowe is more subtle, But I think in this case, because it's a child, you need it to be more expressive. And I don't know, Denzel has somehow manages to be subtle and...
He's got a soft side as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, I think that's
Whereas
it.
Russell Crowe is like...
He has a charming side. I could see how he'd be like, oh yeah, this kid gets on with me and like charming. But yeah, it doesn't feel like you really believe here that Denzel like loves this kid, which he does.
Yeah.
And I don't think you would have quite felt that from
No,
Russell Crowe.
I agree, definitely.
And then apparently, I mean, this is less. So those two are confirmed. De Niro was attached. Russell Crowe was offered it, wasn't interested. A bunch of other people that were apparently at some point considered were Tom Cruise, Will Smith. I think Bruce Willis was someone, I don't think he would have been as good, but I could see him doing, again, an 80% job.
I could see him doing a good job in terms of the first 20 minutes of a film where he's like cold shoulder.
Yeah.
Not very expressive, very much like, I'm just here to do a job. Bruce Willis would have done a good job of that. But in terms of the rest of the movie, I think Denzel was...
I think he would have been good at like all the torturing stuff and sort of
the cold ass.
Yeah, the heart of it would have been hard. But yeah, as we said, we're repeating ourselves. But Denzel's just so good at playing every beat, about playing the guy who's like lost to society, just a deadbeat alcoholic. He's so good.
Lost cause.
Yeah, lost cause. He's good at playing the friend. He's great at playing because he's definitely in a completely different, unique mode when he's being the coach. Like there, he's like no bullshit. You know, one of my favorite lines is, "There's no such thing as tough. You're either trained or you're untrained."
Yeah.
And you can see there that she's just appealed to a part of him that I'm sure he hadn't done anything like that. Because one of the things is that all his work is that he trains. You see it in the CV. He's obviously gone around the world training people and stuff. So that is something that comes to him naturally.
Yeah.
But he manages to do it in a much more fun way than teaching people how to kill,
Yeah,
like teaching
definitely.
how to swim. As I said before, Denzel, who's a very religious man himself, added a lot of the religious stuff because it wasn't in the book. And so I say that this is my favorite Denzel Washington performance because of the range. And to me, that's the top factor for a great actor. I actually had Denzel as my number 3 favorite actor of the 21st century.
Nice.
And I actually said that in the video, which you guys should check out, that if I did an all-time list, I think he'd be second. Brad Pitt is my favorite actor. I put Leo above him in the 21st century because Leo basically his entire career is there, whereas Denzel has a lot of great movies. Have you seen Philadelphia?
No, I haven't.
That is another amazing Denzel. Much less fun than this.
Yeah.
Like, it's not in my top 100, but I will probably do on the... I feel like I've mentioned it more than any other movie for various reasons, but yeah, it's really good. And then obviously at Crimson Tide, he's got and stuff like The Hurricane. He has a great resume pre-2000. So yeah, my second favorite actor of all time. As I said, I think Training Day is a better movie.
Yeah,
I think the plot is more interesting. Ethan Hawke is a very interesting character.
Man, that bathtub scene, that is probably the most intense scene. I get shivers just watching that scene on YouTube on its own. It's so crazy.
But I think the performance is better in Man on Fire. It's more interesting. And because of my... Training Day was not a movie that I don't remember when I watched it the first time. Training Day is still in my top 100. But for me, Man on Fire is higher on my list just because of the performance. One thing I said we'd discuss is our Mount Rushmore of revenge movies, which we're going to call our Mount Revengemore. So we need to take the top 4 movies or character movies where they go on a revenge. And you know what? It wasn't actually... I thought there would be dozens and dozens to pick from.
There's not that many. I struggle to think
So I think I've come up with a pretty solid 4. Who did you have?
John Wick.
Yeah, so I have John Wick.
I'll put Creasy. Why not?
Yeah, I think Creasy.
Maybe not as like the most predominant one. I originally had like Liam Neeson in Taken, but...
Yeah, we decided that doesn't count because he's not actually out for revenge, he's out to save her. This is specifically people who have been wronged because Creasy, when he goes on the rampage, thinks she's dead, so he's out for revenge, not salvation. So there's a big one. There's a Tarantino movie which belongs on this list.
Kill Bill.
Yeah.
Uma.
Yeah, that she might be actually top of the list because she has 2... Because, I mean, in this one, he spends... less than half the movie doing it. She spends 2 entire movies doing it. And then the other one I had is John Matrix, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando, where... Have you seen that?
No, I haven't, no.
So in Commando, I think it's his whole team has been killed by these paramilitary terrorists or whatever. And it's a smaller portion of the movie than Man on Fire. It's like the last 20 minutes. But he literally turns up on this island. He is the epitome of a one-man army with bazooka machine gun. And it's a military base. And he literally kills everyone and blows everything up. And it's just super badass. So, yeah, I'm saying Mount Revengemore is, in no particular order, John Wick, I just realized it's 3 Johns: John Wick, John Creasy, John Matrix, and the bride in Kill Bill.
Yeah.
So normally here we would do a modern recasting of like, oh, who would play so and so if they made it today? But we don't have to do that because Netflix have done a modern recasting. So they've cast Yahya Abdul Mateen, only 39 in this. I think Denzel was around 50 when he made it.
Really?
Yahya is known from Aquaman. He played Morpheus in the new Matrix. He was in Ambulance, Wonder Man. He's not an A-lister, but is obviously the sort of role, if he's really good and it turns out to be amazing, that could make him. I think it's a bit like with Alan Ritchson and Reacher, which turned out to be really good, and it kind of took him to the next level.
He's like an up-and-coming action star. Is that the thing with him?
I don't think he was known for being an action star so much, but he's a decent actor.
Yeah.
And he doesn't stand out in any of those things as being amazing, but he's not someone that I'm like, oh no, he's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So we shall see. I have very little faith in it because I just think it's such a tight rope to walk.
Oh, definitely.
As I said, we were talking about this before. They've decided to have a 15-year-old girl, I think, as the kid. So I think that's going to be a completely different
the
dynamic.
dynamic's totally going to change.
Because it would be really easy for it to be creepy.
Oh, it's super creepy.
Even in The Man on Fire, but that's why Denzel is so good because there's never any type of creepiness between them. The rest of the cast aren't super famous, other than Bobby Cannavale, who plays the Christopher Walken role. I'm a big Bobby Cannavale fan, so I think he'll be really good in that. Obviously, the important thing is for them to have a good vibe to the Creasy character. Apparently, a lot of the scenes with Christopher Walken and Denzel were improvised.
Really, yeah. Just two professionals.
Exactly.
Like, we don't need no script.
Yeah. Speaking of script, perfect segue. It was written by Brian Helgeland, who also wrote LA Confidential, one of my favorite movies. We'll be doing on the podcast for sure one day. Mystic River, the Sean Penn movie.
Yeah.
And he was this is quite an interesting story. He was trying to transition into directing. So he's written a bunch of good stuff. And then he wrote and directed Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger. And he didn't really want to write this because he basically didn't want to write anything he wasn't going to direct at this stage in his life. He was trying to do that fully. He was told, we want you to write it. And if Tony Scott passes on it, then you'll be allowed to direct it. So, and he says in the interview, kind of tongue in cheek, he's like, I don't know if they actually would have gone through on that, but just in case he wrote it.
Yeah.
Obviously, Tony Scott did it, so he didn't get to direct it. But so, and here's a really cool story. This is the #1 thing on the IMDb trivia, but it's in the document, because I thought this can't be true. How can it be verified? But it's in the documentary. The Brian Helgeland, the writer, the first time he was introduced to the Man on Fire universe was he went into a video store in the 80s and asked the clerk, what movie should I want? I want an action movie. And the guy said, you should watch the 1987 version. And I can tell from your smile that you've read this as well. Who was that clerk?
Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I saw that and was like, this is too good. But no, he says it. So that's really cool. But yeah, the thing I really loved about it is a lot of the best lines are actually in the book. Not all of them, but many of them. So for example, what's the catch? I'm a drunk. Like that is there verbatim.
Very deadpan, yeah.
Yeah. So favorite lines. What are some of your favorites?
I like the scene where the guy's about to be blown up by the suppository bomb, and he's like, "One last wish, please. One last wish." He's like, I wish you had more time." And then he just walks off. That's great.
We talked in the entertainment about how one of the many dimensions of movies that it's funny, and it's stuff like that. I think, yeah, because the stuff with Peter, like the smiling, you're smiling, that's cute, and it's kind of funny, but it's more cutesy than funny. But I think a lot of the action stuff is where the humor lies.
And for me, a lot of my favorite lines they sort of feel more off the cuff type lines, not like a full on scripted. He's about to paint his masterpiece, which is a great line.
Yeah.
But I like the little things where it's
that's
like,
cool.
That's what they keep on saying. I'm just a professional.
Yeah. I'm so tired. Yeah.
That.
So that's one. So I was telling you this before. I was trying to find the exact quotes, and I found a pre-production script, and a lot of the quotes I couldn't find it in there, which means that they weren't scripted, and that's a perfect. I think there is a line that everyone keeps saying that, but there's nothing in the script about the tapping or said. I'm so sick of hearing that. So we talked about it. But do you think God will forgive us? It's not so much that line, but it's again. So do you think God will forgive us for what we've done? And then Christopher Walken goes, nah. And then Denzel just goes, he looks off pensively and says, no, me neither. So that's like quite a cool moment. Then later on, there's forgiveness is between them and God. It's my job to arrange the meeting.
Great line. It's a bit. The good thing about this movie is they have the right amount of cliche when it comes to lines, but it's not. They don't go over the top on the cliche level, but it's like you sort of need a bit of cliche at times.
Absolutely. Apparently that line was taken from someone during the War on Terror who said it about Osama bin Laden. So it's our job to arrange the meeting.
I mean, they had one Creasy had one in Macabre where it's like, revenge is a dish best served cold, which is super cliche. But
So that's my least favorite line of the movie.
It's not good, but
because A, it's cliche, but B, it doesn't make any sense because he's not that line. I don't know if it's originally from, but it's most famous from The Count of Monte Cristo, where the guy was locked away for 15, 20 years and then came back for revenge. But I don't think it applies here because he hasn't been, it's not like he's waited years and years. I think in the book where he's waited months and he's come back and meticulously planned, it would be more appropriate. But yeah, so I think that's a bit of a silly one. And it is just so over the top cliche. Then I like what's the catch? I drink. A bullet always tells the truth is a good one.
Classic.
The gunshot holds no fear. And like you said, you like that with the training. There's no such thing as tough. You're either trained or untrained. And then this is the good one. Again, obviously very scripted. What are you going to do? What I do best. I'm going to kill him. Anyone that was involved. Anyone who profited from it. Anyone who opens their eyes at me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, yeah.
Kill them all.
And then, okay, my friend, it's off to the next life for you. I guarantee you won't be lonely.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And then there's multiple in that Christopher Walken thing. He'll deliver more justice in a weekend than 10 years of courts and tribunals, so stay out of his way. And then later on, Miguel says, what was she to Creasy? This is actually a really good one. Light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. Somehow she showed him that it was all right to live again. And then a few minutes later, Creasy's art is death. Yeah. And he's about to paint his masterpiece. Yeah. And then, as I said, I really like that. You're the president? The president? Ooh. And then, I'm a professional. That's what everyone keeps telling me. I'm sick of tired of hearing it.
Tap, tap, tap.
This was a cool one. So we'll talk about it in the moment in the music. So the Blue Bayou song is extremely meaningful. But in the original script, they talk about the Blue Bayou a lot more. I think they almost hammer it over the head, whereas it's only mentioned one time at the end when he says goodbye. And so this is pretty much the last quote of the movie. When she says, where are you going? I'm going home too. I'm going to Blue Bayou. And then a moment later she says, I love you, Creasy. There's a pause. And you love me, don't you? And then he goes, yes, I do. With all my heart, Pita, go. That last bit, I didn't actually hear it until I played it really slowly. But yeah, it's very, it really gets you.
Yeah, it's a good end scene.
It is. And it's nice that obviously there's stuff that happens, but that's basically the last scene. The last interaction between two people being them seems quite perfect.
Yeah.
Then recapping the themes, we've talked about these. I won't go into too much depth, but haunting of the past, PTSD, forgiveness, redemption, revenge versus justice. Let's spend a moment on that. This is purely revenge. He does give information to the journalists so they can kind of use that for bigger things, but all he cares about is revenge.
Yeah, he's not going to a police and be like, oh, this is what I've done and this is where these bad guys are. It's like, no, I'm going solo.
And it's basically a suicide mission.
Yeah.
And then love, paternal love, because that's what he has. He has the love between a father and a daughter, which is just beautiful. And honestly, you see those scenes between them, and it's like that's the relationship every father and daughter should aspire to have. Is the relationship they have. Obviously, she doesn't have with her father. One thing that we found so how weird is it in the deleted scenes that at one point they talk about him having 2 grown daughters?
Yeah, it's a bit. I don't think it would have worked.
No, I think it totally changes the character because the idea needs to be that he's this solitary man who's never known what it's like to love a child.
Yeah, because he has no girlfriend, probably no family, so it's like isolated.
Exactly. Yeah, and in the book, there's nothing like that. So I'm glad they did that. Sacrifice, and then this the religious thing, which is losing faith, finding your purpose, and then achieving redemption through sacrifice. I think that I only realized it when we talked about it, but I totally think it's the right call, the ending, because it kind of cheapens it if it ended with the killing of the voice, because the most important thing is their relationship, not him dying.
Yeah.
And then violence, corruption, the use of violence, the art of it. All right, moving on to the production. I always like to start here with the brands because this podcast is brought to you by Concave Brand Tracking. If you're a brand that places your products in entertainment, make sure to contact us at info@concavebt.com for data on how your brands are performing and most importantly, the value they get. So the example I took for this one was our friends at Jack Daniel. It's only on screen for 21 seconds.
I mean, it is one of the main product placements products, but there are other brands that
I think
more...
So I think like something like Mercedes gets more screen time and more value.
Yeah.
But Jack Daniel is a perfect example of like quality over quantity. It's only on screen for 21 seconds, but it's very central. It's part of it. But those 21 seconds were worth almost $5 million in product placement value because the movie has now been seen, hundreds of millions of times by everyone. But other brands what other brands did you notice?
So obviously Mercedes is their car of choice. Speedo, when it came to the swimming scene, those were the only ones which sort of come to mind. But I know there was one or two other little.
Yeah, so the watch, the Casio watch,
Casio, yeah, I forgot about
Coca-Cola appeared at one point, and then the phones he uses at various points. There's Nokia,
yeah.
and then he also uses a Motorola phone at one point later on. But yeah, not the biggest product placement movie, but a lot. There's probably a good 100 brands in it. So the movie was filmed on location in Mexico. Apparently, it was the first major production to be filmed there in almost 50 years for various reasons, logistical, safety. Apparently, it was an extremely hard city to film in part because of the security. There's so many stories about crew members being mugged, about all the security they had to be having. It sounded pretty horrible. But also, apparently, Mexico City was a very inconvenient city to film in because the roads are narrow, the traffic is terrible.
So busy as well.
Yeah. So, but I'm glad they did because it really adds a vibe.
Yeah.
So now this is actually the part I was most excited to tell you about. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the crazy cinematography and how they did it. So there were 3 to 4 main things that Tony Scott talks about in the behind the scenes about how they achieved the unique visuals. The first thing is obviously the colors are like really, whenever it like flashes and stuff, that's a technique called reversal stock, which is basically a special way you treat the film. So it just makes the colors pop in a completely different way. So they just flash between those to give that effect.
Nice.
Then there's cross-processing, which is another visual thing to just give it that like funky look. But the most interesting one is, so back in the day, 100 years ago, the oldest cameras used to be hand cranked.
Yeah.
So cameras, they normally do 24 frames per second. But back then, you literally, basically, it was like taking photos manually. And yet, apparently, it was a really valuable skill to be someone who had like really good rhythm. So you could actually crank the camera at 24 frames per second.
You could maintain
exactly.
a set
but
frame per second.
Now, and obviously, very quickly, they developed technology to make it automatic. So you didn't have to have someone manually doing it. But by using a camera like that, and they show, and I'll put it on the video version of this, they had a bunch of these cameras and they used those, and that way they could alternate the speed. Sometimes they would go quicker than 24 frames per second to kind of give the more agitated thing, and then sometimes they would slow it down or they would quicken and stuff, and that's how you kind of get that stop start.
Yeah, they have those like time lapse scenes, which you can sort of tell it's a long. You can tell these time lapse scenes, they're quite long scenes, but they somehow like condense it down into a couple of seconds, and it's quite a cool effect.
And then also they use a lot of helicopter shots, so it would cut from down to the top, and just all of that together. That's mostly how they got it. Another, again, it's in the behind the scenes, up at the video, a very cool thing I saw is during the kidnapping scene, there's a lot of what we're talking about, but specifically there's a lot of the camera turning around him, and they show there's a point where Denzel is standing on the floor and they have like a rail go all the way around him, and they just have the camera zooming around, and that's how you get the shot of him not moving but the thing going. But then they had another thing where they basically put Denzel on a board, and they basically had this really long board with Denzel on one end and the camera on the other, and it was like a merry-go-round.
Oh, okay.
And so Denzel and the camera are basically moving together, but the background is moving behind them. And it just gives, I hadn't really thought about how they'd achieve that, but that by alternating between these two things, it just gives this like super cool way of like the world is going round and he's becoming overwhelmed and he's thinking about everything. And I love seeing how they achieve stuff.
Yeah,
like
especially at the start of a kidnapping scene. It's when he's connecting the dots, and that's when the camera's like doing that.
They probably spent half a day just to get 5 seconds of stuff.
Yeah.
Apparently, Denzel nicknamed him 9 Camera Tony because Tony Scott apparently is known for just using shit. Like some people, like Tarantino, only use 1 or 2 cameras.
Really?
Like Tarantino talks about how he plans every single shot. Like he's like, no, we don't need 3 cameras because I know that I want this shot of Leo and Brad Pitt walking, so I really only need 1 camera. And it's 2 different approaches of basically either you plan every shot carefully and you only need 1 camera, or you do what Tony Scott is like, we're going to film everything from every angle because that way in the editing room I'll have the choice to use what I want.
But isn't that quite common for these big action scenes where especially when we have a lot of explosions, they have to get like different angles and
definitely. But I think even with action, I'm sure Quentin Tarantino used more than 1 camera, but I think even there they would choreograph it to be like, we're gonna see this person having their arm shot from this angle. We don't need 1,000,000. But obviously when you're doing the style he's doing and you want to maybe cutting every couple of frames to a different angle, you need a lot more. They talked about some scenes they had like as many as 15 cameras going, and they're all different types of camera. It sounds like from an editing point of view, it must have been a nightmare because they're different types of camera, they're different types of film.
A lot of late night coffee runs.
A lot of it was filmed in 35mm, which is gives a very unique look and feel, very different from digital.
Do you feel like the editing style feels a bit outdated? I mean, obviously it's within its time, right? It's an early 2000s look, but do you still like the vibe of...
I do. I think if I saw a movie now that was trying to recreate it, I would go, oh, that's such a cliche. But I think when you're the one that invented the cliche, you're allowed to like do... I'm sure it was inspired by other things, but I think it belongs in its time. I think it's very cool. But yeah, it's not something I want everyone to start doing.
It doesn't feel dated, but you can obviously tell it's early 2000s, but it works. Yeah. I like it. I liked it.
Oh yeah, so talking of Tony Scott, he was obviously involved in this movie. Like everyone talked about how he'd been wanting to make it for 20 years. So when Denzel was brought on board, he was really taken by how passionate Tony Scott was about the material. Apparently Denzel also was at a point of his career where he seemed a bit lost and he didn't really know, which is very cool because it's kind of like he was in the actor version of where Creasy was, of being a bit lost, and this role really helped him like find his like love and passion for acting again, which was very cool. Nice. But yeah, he was very taken by how passionate Tony Scott was because obviously he'd been wanting to make this for so long. Yeah, it seems like the process of making it, the hours that were worked, the danger, the stress, the everything, it just seemed like like I got a bit of anxiety watching the documentary. But yeah, it's what must be tragic is if you put all that time and energy and then the movie isn't good. But obviously in this case, it worked. The last thing I looked up was about the twang. I think I asked you, do you think it was a guitar?
I thought it was a guitar.
So it is a guitar. Yeah. So it's a guitar that's basically a distorted string hit processed to sound like a weapon. It's used like a sonic punch. So this is what they do to get a unique sound is you take something and then you just put filter after filter. Exactly. And it's the sort of thing, if 6 months from now you played me just that guitar string, I'd be like, Man on Fire, 100%.
Bedroom scene, Man on Fire, Kill 'Em All,
So that's a very cool score, which just adds, as I said, this movie doesn't just look cool, it sounds cool. And then the main song is The Blue Bayou, which you said you knew this song.
I don't think I...
So sorry.
Before having watched Man on Fire, I wasn't aware.
But we were having dinner with Sunita tonight, and she was like, oh, well, because it's been covered a million times, so it is apparently quite a famous song. I wasn't aware of it either. But in the book, it's talked about a lot. The Creasy's a big music fan, and the Pinta in the book realizes that he listens to it every night before going to sleep, so she kind of knows that he's going to sleep because he's listening to it. He plays it, I think he buys the CD, plays it during the Jack Daniels scene, and then he plays again at the end. It's obviously an homage to the book, but it's super relevant because the whole point of the Blue Bayou lyrics is the idea of someone who's kind of lost in the world, and they strive to go back to this. It's kind of heaven, but it's a place that's home, it's a place of family, it's a place of love, and the Blue Bayou is that place. So at the end when he says, I'm going to the Blue Bayou, he's basically saying, I'm going to heaven, I'm going to get forgiveness, I'm going home.
Finding solace.
So it's very cool. Obviously, that's a song that existed before. I think I realized this on the last watch. There's that whole, it's obviously not Enya, but that almost Enya-like thing where there's like a woman's voice, like, especially at the end. And I was like, this sounds a lot like Gladiator.
That last scene with like the bridge, obviously we didn't have those sort of bridges in Gladiator, but it definitely that wide landscape shot was very Gladiator-esque.
I think on the bridge scene, another thing I think that's so cool about that is because the whole movie is taking place in the concrete jungle. Like it's so dirty and smuggy and everything, and now suddenly being out in nature is very cool.
I mean, Creasy could have walked through a field of wheat and put his hand.
That would have been a little too on the nose.
Yeah, sorry, Ridley, I'm copying you.
So I checked. Oh, I wonder if it's the same composer, and it's not. The composer for Man on Fire was Harry Gregson Williams, and Hans Zimmer did Gladiator, but Harry Gregson Williams was basically a Hans Zimmer protege, so he's obviously, so you're hearing the same DNA as Gladiator, but just very different and more industrial.
And in terms of other songs used, they had like Claire de Lune.
Oh yeah,
that's a very cliche classical music score used in movies. Pavarotti as well. There's like a little Pavarotti clip, but I think obviously with Blue Bayou is the main sort of foundation.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
So let's recap. Now that we've gone through all the detail, kind of reiterate what you said at the beginning about why you love this movie, but you can use the stuff that we actually talked about. So why do you love this movie so much?
Fundamentally, it's the balance between the emotion and the aggression and reaction. You know, we have this story where it has this beautiful relationship between Creasy and Pita. We have the badassery of him like taking revenge, and it's like the yin and yang, of the movie, which I find so great.
Yeah, same for me. I just love those scenes like the concubine, you're smiling, I'm smiling, that just really makes you understand the love that he has for her. But then also he is still the person that he was before, this absolute killing machine.
Oh, machine, yeah.
And you're basically given permission to enjoy seeing him blow people up with a rocket launcher, slice people's finger off, blow them up from their insides. And yeah, it's cathartic to watch that.
And it all feels justified.
Exactly, because it is.
Yeah.
So where would you put this movie in your all-time list?
I think I would put it maybe just outside top 10. I wouldn't say it's like top 10, but I do really enjoy this film. So I would probably put it as like a 14 or 15.
Nice. Yeah. So I have it at the moment. So I have an actual list that I'm constructing as I make this podcast. So this is my favorite Denzel movie. Training Day and American Gangster are also on the list, but they're lower. Right now, this movie sits at number 33 on my list. So yeah, so that's obviously not as high as you, but that's still really high. And it's actually weird thinking about it that I'm saying that Denzel's my second favorite actor, and yet my favorite movie of his is so high. But I think it's because like I love this movie, I love this role, and I do think when we're doing Devil Wears Prada, I was thinking that I think Meryl Streep's performance in that is one of the best performances. If you take just the performance of all time, I think Denzel in this is probably a top 10 performance for me. If you take just that, because it's the movie around it is kind of where it loses some ranks. But I think one of the reasons that Denzel is so high for me overall is that he has actually been in so many movies.
Yeah, and he is a tactician at his art.
Yeah,
I think I mentioned to you when other A-list actors act with him, they always say it's like going back to acting school because he's like such a masterful actor.
I was lucky enough to see him with Jake Gyllenhaal in Othello, and that was amazing. Like he's just Jake Gyllenhaal was great, but Denzel is clearly just like literally steals the spotlight. So that was very cool. But yeah, top 20 for you, top 40 for me. Man on Fire. Well, thank you very much for being on the podcast, for coming back again. And everyone out there, thank you very much for listening. Let us know in the comments if there's anything that we missed. Let us know how you feel about this movie. Make sure to subscribe for new episodes on the last Thursday of every month. And you can also listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok for near daily content. Thank you very much.